Yeah, I'd like to call the Regional Planning Committee meeting to order this Wednesday, April 10th. Time now is a little after 6 p.m. And for those that are joining us online, I'm not really exactly sure what this part of the meeting says. Anyways, we're moving on. Public comment protocol. The public can submit written comment to the committee by sending an email to the Regional Plan Committee at flagstaffaz.gov. Time for spoken comment will be provided on a first come, first served basis with sign up for times being available at the beginning of the meeting by filling out the form in the room. Spoken comment will be limited to the topics on the agenda and in the staff's presentation. Can we get roll call, please?
Yes. Allie Applin.
Here.
Paul Byer.
Here.
Tina Berger.
Yes.
Alicia Chi. Follow up with her. Abel Estrella.
Here.
Dirk Foreman.
Present.
Anthony Garcia.
Here.
Susie Garrettson. Here. Robert Hamilton.
Here.
Michelle James.
Here.
Rick Miller.
Here.
Walter Phelps. Maybe, I think he just joined. He did. Let me make sure he's promoted. Sorry, just a second. Walter, I just called your name for roll call. Can you hear us, Walter?
Yes, I'm here.
Great, thank you. Kim Robertson. John Ruggles. John Van Landingham.
Yep.
Diane Vosick. Here. Al White. Did I call Tom Pearson? No.
Here I am.
There we go. Sorry, I got distracted by Walter coming in at that minute. That I think is everyone.
Cool. Well, we'll be moving on to the Indigenous Land Acknowledgement. Anybody in the room feel like saying it for us today? I don't want to have to call on you, but
I'd be happy to do so.
Paul's doing this.
City of Flagstaff humbly acknowledges the ancestral homelands of this area's nations and original stewards. These lands still inhabited by native descendants. Classes held. Border mountains sacred to indigenous people. We honor them, their age legacies, their traditions, and their continued contributions. We celebrate their past, present, and future generations who will ever know this place as home.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, we'll be moving on to number 4, which is overview of the regional plan drafts and version. Says here a short reminder, presentations on this process are updated for updating the regional plan and the versions of the drafts being created. Sarah, what did you have in mind for this part?
Thanks. I am happy to offer a few slides today. I think this meeting, after we review the 2 chapters that we're going to discuss today, marks the halfway mark in the amount of chapter content that the committee has reviewed. And so I wanted to just check in really quick and make sure we are sort of remembering our map of how the topics are organized. And the importance of keeping all of these conversations really tied to land use, transportation, and our key natural resources of water. So the other thing I wanted to bring up is that we've had several questions from folks about, we reviewed a chapter, but are we going to go back to it? Do we get another look at this or don't we? And so we developed this graphic to discuss our writing and reviewing timeline a little differently. So there are lots of public policy documents that get created by doing a bunch of public meetings. And then the planners, the engineers, or the specialists go into our policy closet and we spend 8 months quietly working and writing on our own. And then we come back out with a fully fledged draft for the public to look at. This process that we're doing for the regional plan is much more iterative. And so I just want to highlight a few things about why that's different. So first of all, the fact that it's iterative means that we are going to, over the course of writing the plan, have 9 versions of everything, from start to finish. And for only 2 of the chapters you've reviewed so far, are we actually even on version 3. So version 3 is basically a working draft, which means the committee has reviewed it and we have published a draft to the website. Anything prior to that is either in an internal review or still being looked at by the committee. And so we are very, very early in the process and we expect there to be iterations. The key things to know, I think, is that even at version 3, we have not yet done our formal legal review. So it's really important to know that the regional plan is a document that has a lot of legal tentacles into development review and how the city adopts code. So we are still pre-legal review at this point. And so everything is just a recommendation. We're working on it. It's a working draft. And so we will, after we've gotten all the chapters put together, legal will be looking at these. And when we get the full draft of it back, cover to cover, that is when we will have a second look at it all. And that will include some things that have been changed because we've done some more homework on legal issues associated with the plan. We, of course, do some preliminary work on all of those conversations, but the legal team at the city and county do prefer to have kind of enough pieces to really understand it all together and consider their advice on that area. And they give that advice to staff and we incorporate it. So the August meeting that we're scheduled to have is 27th, and we may need to eventually discuss if that needs to be a longer meeting or spread over a couple nights if we think it's going to be one that we spend more time on. Is when we will get to see all the pieces of it and we'll go through everything that we've already reviewed again. Then the committee does have the option of coming back after the 60-day review if there's conflicting comments or issues we'd like to bring to your attention, and have that opportunity too. So really everything the committee is touching gets touched 2 to 3 times before your work as a group is done. And we hand this process over to the Planning and Zoning Commissions and the City Council and the Board of Supervisors. So remembering, we're in the very beginning of this process. It's not Sarah and Elsa went into a policy closet to get writing. It's a much more collaborative and iterative approach. And that does mean it can be a little confusing too, because we're right now still looking at pieces that are not all knit together.
Yeah, I see this as a process that or I speak for myself, that I am learning through as we go. As probably many of us, besides some of the experts that are in the room, are doing. I want to thank everybody for continuing to stick around for the process. And I don't want anybody to feel overwhelmed by the process, like occasionally I do. Because we need your voice, irregardless of if the comments are just here and there. Sometimes people that don't say a lot say the most when they finally do open up their mouths. So stick around and get ready for a lot more action. Michelle.
Thanks, Anthony. Can we get a copy of that?
Sure, happy to.
Anyone else want that? I can.
Yeah, I do. It's very helpful. I can't type that fast today.
If you could just send that out to the group, I think that would.
Yeah, I'll just send the PDF of that slide out so everybody can kind of just keep it as a visual reminder. We were just getting that question a lot. And I felt the midpoint is a good time to like refocus on where we are.
And but before we, okay, I want to ask the committee, does anybody have any questions about what we just saw or have any input? If we're good, then before we get moving any further, I wanted to highlight that we do have a new member, Robert Hamilton. If you just want to say briefly something about yourself.
My name is Robert Hamilton. Call me Robert. I do live in Doney Park, so I know that I'm not city of Flagstaff, but I'm really appreciative that the city incorporates the outlying regions, and I think it's a really good thing. And I am really struck striving to catch up completely and do all the reading necessary for this. I can't say that I've even read the entire 2030 plan yet, but it's underway. And I have been kind of digging in and really trying to get my hands around all that's going on here. I work for a civil contractor, and my background is in utility planning, design, installation, and construction. And I've worked on quite a few projects around town and seen how things go right, things go wrong, and the difficulties in actually implementing the construction that is kind of directed by the city of Flagstaff and the developers.
Sounds like your input is going to be invaluable to us, Robert. Thank you for coming to the meeting and welcome to the meeting. Don't ever feel ashamed for being a part of our community. I think that we're all in this together, regardless if the line around the city says we belong here or not.
And I have lived in other places in town too, so
You are vetted, sir.
thank you.
Okay, number 5, we'll drop down to number 5, collaboration.
Vice Chair Garcia, I did want to let you know that Alicia Chi, the committee did just join.
Welcome, Alicia. We're excited to hear your commentary as the process goes on, if you so choose to do so. So we'll be moving on to number 5, which is collaboration policy revision from the Resource Stewardship and Resilience chapter. Sarah?
Yeah, I really wish that Al White was here and not made it today. But this was an issue that Al brought to our attention in the Resource Stewardship and Resilience chapter. We had tried to craft some policy language about community engagement around resource stewardship and really liked the first way we wrote it. Fine. So this is our second attempt at that language. And it was provided to you in a memo of changing that to that policy, which would be RS 12 to say, and I don't know if, Elsa, did you pull that one up? Yes. This is from the chapter. Yeah, to basically change it to this language. The original language, which I'll just read out, was proactively and equitably engage community members in neighborhood level and support community-wide stewardship and resilience efforts. And the feedback from the committee at that time was this is too vague. It doesn't really tell us what you mean. So we went back and talked to people, and we hope this is closer to being clear and what we mean. So we open that for your to revisit that discussion. And if we'd like to check in with Alan, we can do that offline as well.
Okay. So since this was brought to us by Al, do you think it would be more appropriate to wait until he's in the room?
I think if anybody else has comments or thoughts about it, I'm still happy to follow up with them, and we could agendize it for next meeting too, if we don't want to spend a lot of time on it.
Okay, I'm open to comment. I just know that from my perspective, I'm not really sure since it's kind of given to me all of a sudden. So, committee? Anybody want to look at this now, or do you want to agendize it for the future where Al might be here?
I guess I'd wait, because right now it's out of context,
Yeah.
and I didn't see the paragraphs that came before. So are we talking about policy RS 12? Is that?
Yeah, that's the new proposed language.
I'd suggest we move it forward to when Al can be here.
Okay.
I think that would be good and give us a time to ruminate over it and let it breathe, let it simmer.
Well, you should still have access to this policy memo that talks about the new language versus the original language. It's in the folder with the rest of the packet.
Okay, thank you. So that brings us to the good stuff. Number 6, draft water resource chapter. So typically go through and go straight to the goals and policies. But I was wondering if the committee would be amenable to do it a little bit differently. And I want to open discussion about this because I think that this is our committee, not mine. So I definitely need input on this. And what I was thinking was folks that have either written comment or personal comment about the chapter itself, not so much the goals and policies, even though we'll get there. If they wanted to bring those out I would be open to that because those will probably affect the goals and policies in the end. Do we think that's a good way to go, or do we have any other ideas?
There is staff from Water Services on the call online to answer questions.
You think, Paul?
Yeah, I guess I did have one reaction, and it will affect the policies later. But if you've ever been to the inner basin, look at your map, there are 9 springs in the inner basin. 7 of them, you walk up to it, it's a concrete slab. 2 of them, it flows for maybe 50 or 60 feet. It goes into a pipe. The 2 that do flow for 50 or 60 feet, it just breaks your heart to see how beautiful it is. To think that we're doing this. We did this 100 some years ago. We should rip that bleeping thing, all that out. We just rebuilt. I was shocked 2 years ago when I saw them rebuilding the old pipeline road and putting a new pipeline in. It's falling apart. Let it fall apart. So I guess I would just like us to consider the fact that we have a fabulous high elevation water ecological settings that have been destroyed for over a century. You never hear, even Forest Service staff will tell me, it's an obscenity, we never should have done it. Why are we continuing that? So it's just,
So do you think this is a question for staff to see if that is still usable or how it pertains?
it is still 1%. 1% of our water supply comes from the inner basin. 1%. Yeah, give it
I
up.
agree with you.
You know?
Michelle?
I think you should ask her who just came in. Okay, she's an expert.
Yeah, Erin's here. Go ahead, Erin.
You have the floor, Erin. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia, and hi, everyone. I'm Erin Young. I'm the Water Resources Manager. So just because the number is 1%, that doesn't reflect the capacity of the system. We have, the city has water rights to the springs and groundwater wells. 1% can reflect just how the system is operated for many reasons, but not the potential that the system has. It has a decent amount of potential. I hope that helps to.
Yeah.
It is very important, and we're actually coming into in May, I understand APS is going to curtail power for a day, where we're looking at the inner basin to help meet community demand, so we don't have to limit water production to meet base demand. So it is still very important. We can turn on the wells and bring in, 20% of demand, even make possibly more. So.
Well, if you look at the last 40 years, we've been nowhere near 20%. When you look at this graph, shows the inner basin, it's averaging 1%. Some years it's 0. Some years it is maybe 3. So it just strikes me as a lost ecological resource.
And
One thing I would say about the scope of the regional plan is the city does have a separate water policy and a water commission that does that work more specifically of working with water services. I think that which water we're turning on and when and what we keep in what condition is really a water rights issue. It may be a little bit outside the scope of the plan. While we try and explain in the plan what water rights we have, that might be something that would not necessarily fall in the plan's purview.
And that occurred to me. I just thought I'm in a room with 30 wonderful people. And if I can just get you excited and go see one of the springs and watch the 100 feet or 55 feet that it flows before it goes into the tube and just say, wow, what we could have.
The infiltration rate is very high in the inner basin. So water infiltrates into the ground where it's collected in the system. And we have reports where geologists documented the runoff without collection of the inner basin water to the city 100 years ago. It never flowed to Lockett Meadow. It infiltrates so quickly. So I think there could be perceptions, and maybe we could talk about that. Perceptions of how we use our water, but that shouldn't diminish the importance of that supply to the city. It's like, I wouldn't want to tell Kachina Village what they're doing. Are you doing it that way? Or the important thing is that they identify the water supplies they have to meet the demand for the community.
That's good information. Thank you for that comment. And you are in a room of people, and I think you are definitely heard. And I have a feeling, moving forward, it's just a notion that we're going to witness or be involved in this kind of conversation again, where we're delving out of the broader regional plan and into cubby holes. So we'll have to be mindful, and when that happens, I'll be sure to help pull you out of those or guide you into the broader discussion of the regional plan when it does happen. But all comments are welcome. I noticed, looking at all the different emails that, Michelle, you had some comments, about the water.
Yeah, I do. And we're not going into the implementation guidelines yet, right?
No, I was hoping that this would kind of spur into, or if have a general discussion outside of them. If they tend to lead there, I think staff is here to take notes on that as well.
Trying to figure out where I want to actually start talking about things.
All right. And while you're doing that, can I ask a question to Aaron real quick? Okay. Aaron, I had a quick question. You mentioned something about how having those retention basins helps store the water and whatnot. And I was thinking that that could also relate to how if we let the snow, if rain doesn't come on the snow right away to wash it down to our level to where we can retain it, it would also have that seeping effect coming from the mountain and not getting all the way down to like our Lake Mary and stuff like that. Is that something else that the city runs into?
And you're referring to the inner basin? Or
Yeah, I was thinking about the snow runoff in general, how it says it needs to be fed by, rain after snow, particularly in time.
rain on snow can bring Upper Lake Mary from 10% to 100% in a week or two.
Yeah.
If we don't have rain on snow and we just have snow melt can also bring the lake level from 10% to 100%. Maybe within a week, but it's less likely as a rain on snow event. So the two are very important. We can also have snow that just sublimates and doesn't melt as runoff into the lake. So there are these kind of a range of scenarios related to snow and winter precipitation. The other benefit of snow pack is the ability to use as the aquifer. When we lose snow to sublimation, we really reduce the risk of recharge to the aquifer. So those events are less common. And they could become less common with climate change recharge.
Yeah.
Hope that helped.
Yeah, I think it adds context to our conversation. And then, Michelle?
Yeah, sure. Some of my comments were related to page 6, the first paragraph. It's a lot about reclaimed water. That's not area of expertise, but I know about it. One of the things that I was interested in is how much water is currently committed, reclaimed water is currently committed. And I gave an explanation in my notes. My recommendations was to change that so that we would actually know how much is already committed, because over time, we may want to change those commitments, right? Like if we get, there's discussion in here about direct potable water, direct water reuse, potable water use, EPR, and those kind of things, we may actually want to keep the water for human consumption rather than wherever it's going, golf courses, for instance, just use golf courses as an example. You may find that it's more valuable for our drinking water and to sell it to the golf course. I'm just thinking in the future, as we deal with climate change, as things get drier, as predicted. And so I thought it would be interesting to know how much water is already committed. So we just had that figure. So, so it's put in perspective with everything else. That's one number that's not. And then the other thing with reclaimed water is some of the paragraphs are implying that that uncommitted water is wasteful. And I think it's valuable. The ecological use of that water is very beneficial. You know, some vague language in there that talks about permitting in the future, but want to acknowledge that ecological use is beneficial use. And, you know, and also the whole idea of recharging the aquifer. All that, so I was making some suggestions about kind of tightening some language up. And then, of course, the concern that I continue to have, F-Cube continues to have, is the recharge of the aquifer with reclaimed water that hasn't had advanced treatment yet. The concern for contamination of the aquifer. And I know that that is something that probably doesn't need to be addressed in these introductory paragraphs, but can be addressed later. And it looks like some edits were made to include some of that. So I was glad to see that. The only other comment I had about that first section was really about the Red Gap Ranch. And I was thinking of actually we needing to change the language so it's actually very clear that it is a significant economic commitment to bring water from Red Gap Ranch. I don't know if people really understand that. I mean, the numbers I've heard is like $300 million. That's probably a really old number now, right? So how much would it cost? And the other thing is it's not something that, you know, if you start the pipeline, you could build it over years, right? If you start it, you got to finish it. You can't change your mind probably. So it's a huge commitment and the public's going to pay for it. So I was thinking that this should be more clear that that's a really significant commitment when we have new technologies that may actually allow us to have potable water that's not as expensive as coming from Red Gap Ranch, right? I know, I'm looking at you. What do you think about that?
May I please comment?
Please.
Direct potable reuse is very expensive and we really, I'm the president of Arizona Water Reuse. And I've been involved with them for 10 years longer. There are a lot of technologies to advance treat water, to purify water. Those technologies have been available, but our water supply solutions are all expensive. It depends on how you drill down to the unit cost of water or these are community decisions that will come forward. You know, what are the smart water planning scenarios that we'll invest in as a community? I really appreciate what you're advocating for, but I'm nervous to put language in that suggests that advanced technologies are cheaper. Until we crunch the numbers, then we have the numbers at that point in time, but they're always changing. So I would hate to lead community members into thinking these technologies are simple or cheaper when we don't know until the experts, like the engineers, really do crunch the numbers for our community.
Yeah, and I see what you're saying. It seems like oh, it's good. The wording is it's so clear that Red Gap Ranch is kind of going to be the solution to everything. And I just want us to step back a little bit and go, maybe Red Gap Ranch isn't the way to go. And have some language in there that says that you're going to be exploring all those options. And the other options may actually, I mean, you don't have to say it like this, but just something.
Maybe it wasn't clear enough in there, but I'm always careful to say Red Gap Ranch or other advanced treatment
I've
options.
seen it other places.
If that isn't clear, let's make it clear every time we mention future water supplies that we mention the range. And those options, just even regional options.
I know that the last water resources chapter in our current plan really does like bank heavily on Red Gap Ranch, and it doesn't talk about other advanced treatment options. It says we have Red Gap Ranch and that's our solution and that's what we're going with. So I think it is the intent of what we were trying to accomplish in this chapter to show that it's a more open discussion than maybe we thought it was 10 years ago.
10 years ago, direct potable reuse, a community could not do direct potable reuse in the state of Arizona because it wasn't permitted yet, as you know. And only this year is the Department of Environmental Quality adopting rules that allow for now it's advanced water purification. And valley cities are constructing these facilities. Tucson, they're going to have to pilot them for 5 years before they're ready to bring that supply into the community. So we'll learn a lot from those communities. Fortunately, we're not in a crisis position where we're having a water resource crisis. We can kind of see how these technologies develop and learn from other communities. Breakout was a measure we needed to get our designation of adequate water supply. And it was voted on by the community of Flagstaff in 2003 or 4. It passed with like an 80% support for acquiring water rights and a water supply.
My point is, it's just a really significant investment and that should be.
Yes.
We're not talking, oh, it's another bond for.
Yeah.
50 million. It's actually a lot more than that.
That could rival our entire city budget for a year. A lot of money. And also, I just wanted to mention to you, Michelle, that this is kind of, when I read through this, I don't have a lot of expertise in this department, although I am really concerned with water and I do attend many water meetings. I felt, I think that the wording could be stronger and placed a little bit in more maybe repetitive or however you want to say it to give us more context for the potable reuse and things like that. But for lack of a better term, layman's perspective, I was able to garner it pretty quick and really happy that I saw that in there. But I do stand behind Michelle by saying that it's any place that you can put that a little bit more to educate those like myself who may not have known about that technology in the regional plan. I think is significant to know that we have more alternative. Maybe did we have any more discussion pertaining to Michelle's comments?
She had more.
Yeah, I mean, just that first, that way it's easily digestible. And then, did you want to move on to your next one, Michelle?
Do you just want me to go through the other comments? Some of these are.
Those ones mostly based on the policies and goals.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll,
Definitions.
yeah, so if you don't mind, we'll just save that for when we dive into that. I just wanted to touch base with the commissioners that did write some comments or have some thoughts.
I do have one.
Yeah, Susie?
On page 7, big paragraph that despite per capita water use declining, Flagstaff projects a new water source will be required in the future. And in the reviews, someone, I agree, changed the word from will to may be required instead of will be required. And I really feel that that needs to be, I think if, you know, you've got will in there, it's going to indicate to someone that you must do this. And may, you can do it, but you might not. You might find other things you can do. Really wouldn't see that may back in there.
Okay, Sarah, did you have any context?
Yeah, I mean, the growth projections that we have for the community really do support the will for the may.
But then may not. I mean, the may will include, you can still do it.
Sure, but I think that there's a reason staff has really pushed to keep it as will, because we don't want the community to feel like that is somehow we're gonna meet our 100-year water supply designation without that. There's going to be a tipping point in the next 20 years where we have to move on. There's just not that much more indoor water conservation that can be done. And as the water conservation study that we did 2 years ago, 3 years ago showed, we are kind of running out of conservation methods that would be as effective as the ones we've done. Basically our marginal rate of return on investing in water conservation is declining. And so I think staff really believes it's a will, like it.
I agree with that, but we're the regional plan committee.
Sure, but this is the background section where we're trying to be as factual as possible. And there are times where I do think the previous regional plan committee wanted things to be more open when it wasn't as factually based. And that was very confusing in later development conversations. If we say may, or we soften the language when it's really strongly factually based on how all the models and all the projections show, even the low projection, which includes like a negative birth rate and almost no in-migration for Coconino County, would still trigger the need for an additional water supply in the next 20 years. So I just don't think that it's not in the margin of error to say may at this point with the data we have. that's just what staff knows based on the context and forecasting we have currently.
Maybe
And
Rick
Susie?
might-
One moment. Susie, I was wondering, is it okay if I ask a question to Aaron, for more context? And then before we have a group discussion about this?
Yeah, and then I might make a motion.
Okay, cool.
So,
Yes. So Aaron, definitely add your thoughts after this question, but, Sarah, inspired some thought on my behalf. And this, 20-year projection, it was much less before the conservation, correct? And it's moved to, we've gained an extra 10 years because of the conservation facts, but we're running out of, tactics at this point. Is that true?
For water conservation.
Yes.
So in 2020, our water conservation strategic plan identified an additional 20 gallons per capita per day that could be saved over a 20-year period. From 100 total gallons per capita down to 80. That's our entire water production rate divided by the community. That's not just our residential GPCD, which is like in LA, is their residential is 80. This is a total community, NAU, commercial. We've identified 20 gallons per capita that can happen. That does push out a demand for a new water supply through time. As my job as a water resource manager, it's to protect the community with wet water. City council directed us to do 100 years planning, that's several generations always. And what we might trigger a need to develop a water supply sooner if, because we pull 80% of our water from watersheds that are at risk of wildfire.
And that's between 100 and 1,000 feet below, right?
It's about more like 600 to 2,000 feet
Oh,
below
okay.
land surface. And
So a good drought or something like that could affect that.
we generally ride out a drought with groundwater wells. But we're paying attention to how quickly the aquifers draw down in various areas in our well fields. And we work with Kachina Village and sometimes Stony Park, to keep tabs on what's happening on the aquifer as a regional picture. We project out how withdrawals in the aquifer can impact springs like Oak Creek, Sterling Spring, the springs that rely on the sea aquifer. So my job is to make sure that our impacts to the aquifer don't impact our riparian areas that are fed by the sea aquifer springs. My recommendation was maybe just to call out that the city of Flagstaff is a will and not a may. It's the city water resource section that is a will. If the committee makes it a may, that's fine, but our city council adopted the designation of adequate water supply that is a will because we're trained by the state regulatory framework. The will could include reuse. Once ADWR adopts reuse into our availability to add that into our portfolio to meet future water demand, we're always looking for the best solution for the community. And we're not required to do that in rural Arizona. We could be developing without adequate water supplies. And then it's a race to the bottom of the aquifer.
That's not good.
And we can have businesses come in and our wells dry. So we're making a claim for our water every day with the water rights work we do and keeping our eye on all the options we have. Not only red average, but all options. And I'm sorry, now I'm going off on a.
Yeah. And just one more thing for clarity and to bring context to this. And you don't have to answer this, I guess, if you don't want to. But so when we're talking about 100 years of water use, that includes Red Gap Branch. We're really looking at 20 years of sustainable water use without Red Gap Branch and without portable reuse or anything like that?
The trigger for a Red Gap Branch is 20 years, you're correct. And the 20 years, we look at the regional plan land uses and we apply a water rate demand per land use type. So high density residential has a gallons per day demand. Commercial has a gallons per day. Manufacturing. And we add all that up to the 20-year demand, and if it exceeds our current groundwater sources, Upper Lake Mary, Inner Basin, it triggers ADWR wants to see that we're investing in that next water source because it takes decades to develop a pipeline from
Right.
somewhere.
Money and all that.
So you're correct on the 20 years. And I don't know if I reflect that in here.
Yeah, I just don't think that that point's driven home enough, and it's probably because of legal reasons or something like that, but I like to let everybody know that we got 20 years of water. That being said, does anybody have any more questions or comments about the will or the may?
I just want to put on the record that Walter Phelps has put in a comment chat that he supports May.
Oh, I like that. Cool. Susie? Carry on.
Do I make a motion? Is that the procedure? I don't know.
I'm not exactly sure. Since we're not an official committee, how do we go about this?
Your rules and procedures state that someone makes a suggestion and then everyone has to go around and say if they can live with that or not. And then
That's the part that David would have been.
that was,
at, that-
David would know. But who can live with it, who can't live with it. I will say this is probably one that staff will go back and look at, and if staff can't arrive at agreement with the committee, we will have to come back with more briefing papers of why. Just from my work with Aaron,
I get it.
yeah, staff would be uncomfortable softening this language because it indicates that
Yeah.
maybe we don't need those resources, or maybe we could reuse them for something else. I think it would open us up to decision-making that makes our water resources less secure in the future. And I know that that seems minor, but I will note for you that staff uses the term will very sparingly in all of the background material. And if it was chosen here, it's because there's strong data that supports it.
You are heard, for sure. Robert?
A comment on this is, from my perspective and from reading KRS code here on what is mandated in the general plan, that we have to know what our resources are, what's the growth plan, and your analysis of how much water you're gonna have. And that's kind of our job here, is to know how much we've got, where it's going, and not now, but in the future. This is about future growth. This is 2045. And then an analysis of how you're gonna allocate that. I would defer to water experts if they are saying that we will not have water for growth in 2045, that we should believe them.
Oh, yeah, I don't think that that's up for debate. I think that we're just hinging on this word that a committee member does want to change. So you want to,
Just make a-
Michelle, please jump in.
I was the one, at least one of the people who put in will instead of may, or may instead of will.
Yes.
And what I was thinking about was Red Gap Branch. That's what I assumed was meant by that. But then you just answered it. I was just gonna ask you that question, Aaron, that includes direct potable reuse. And that's what I wanted to get at was, let's not go to Red Gap Branch first. Let's look at other options.
Yeah.
And if putting in will includes other options like direct potable reuse, I'm comfortable with that. But I didn't know that when I read it.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
thinking it just meant Red Gap Ranch. So that clarification really helps me be more comfortable with.
All right. Is it more discussion, y'all? And if not, I wanted to ask Susie if she wanted to add a little bit more selling points to her case, or if she just wants to go through and
I think she'll just convince me maybe we don't,
okay,
unless somebody else wants to, but I think I understand now better after what you had to say in Michelle's comment about the other sources were added.
I think we can go back through the chapter and just make sure we're really driving the point home that even though if you read previous chapters, you'd think Red Gap Branch, Red Gap Branch, Red Gap Branch. But we're actually, the menu is getting bigger.
I noticed that on this draft, coming from somebody who may or may not have read previous drafts. But yeah, I totally picked up on that. I was actually a little bit thrown off on it. I had to do some research and learn more about it, and then I was on board, but it took me a minute. And it's weird because I saw a lot of no's and yes shakings of heads that I think meant the same exact thing. That we should just move on from here. So we're good. Right.
Just really quickly, I want to let you know that Ally Applin has had to leave. She had another event to go to.
Okay.
And Kim Robinson arrived, but I haven't seen, I don't think we've promoted her yet.
Oh, cool. Well, make sure we promote Kim. Okay, and then,
Walter Phelps has his hand up.
oh yeah, let's hear what Walter wants to say.
Well, I appreciate the perspectives that were exchanged on the will or the may. But I feel like you know the the data that was collected by U.S. Geological Survey that is referenced, and I've worked with Geological Survey staff before. Would it be appropriate to them present to the group? I don't know if there's a subcommittee to this group that is just focusing on the water issue. So I'm not sure if a presentation to the whole group is necessary or not, but I just feel like that would be helpful. Otherwise, I feel like I'm agreeing with staff. So that's my thought.
Thank you, Walter. That's good for all of us to come to some sort of consensus and also for your voice to be heard. Thanks for that comment. Staff, if you heard what Walter was saying about possibly more information that pertains to what he was talking about, and you think that it would be useful, I think we would be open to it. Although we are on the chapter now and it might be redundant since we have more chapters coming forward. But I'm open to having more information about what Walter wanted to for my own personal satisfaction, because I care about this community and I care about the water that we're going to have for at least the next 20 years. So are we kind of where you wanted to be, Michelle, with your comments before we got to the goal and things of that nature? All right, so then I'll move on to the next comments that I have off the top of my head, and that's from Abel.
Yes. As you all know, we live in the Southwest. Water is an issue. It's always an issue. It's an issue with everyone. I was going to start off with using recycled water suggestion, but because we're on Red Gap Branch, I applaud the city for going after extra resources in water, because water has been an issue in the Southwest because of droughts. We're high desert, and so we always have to be watching out for it. So the more resources we can obtain, in addition to Red Gap Branch, I think needs to be done. And maybe, and I think it really does say that in here, but I do have an issue, and I did raise it, and like, and that issue is on page 13, at the very bottom, it says regional partners and the public, it says increase the water security for all through continued partnerships that include state agencies, the county, indigenous nations, cities, water providers through Coconino Plateau. And I'm just a little leery because what does it mean? What does security mean in relationship to infection? You know, because I'm afraid, and I need to be really honest that we have to be concerned about Flagstaff. That's why we went to go get other water resources, Red Gap Branch as an example, and hopefully we'll get more. But the point is, okay, the indigenous nations are outside of Flagstaff. Yes, we're partners. Yes, you know, we need to be equitable in all respects. The point is, what does that statement mean that what security means in relationship to continued partnerships?
That
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'm prepared to answer that.
and maybe Sarah, do you know anybody else who might have taken part in writing that statement that would be better apt to share their opinion. It's fine.
I mean, let me see if I can restate your question, Abel, and see if it helps us answer it a little. And if I get it wrong, tell me, okay? I think what your concern is you want to understand what does it mean when we engage in those partnerships and like, why are they a water security strategy for Flagstaff? And you want to understand that they don't make us insecure because we're kind of in water competition sometimes with surrounding water users. And I think you kind of, Aaron kind of said, like, we don't want to be in a situation where everybody's straw is in the sea aquifer and we're racing to the bottom of the aquifer, right?
Yeah, this is, I know we went around on phrases like this and it's kind of tricky. The Coconino Plateau Watershed Partnership was formed by the ADWR in, I think, 1999, when it was clear in ADWR that there were water supply issues in this region or questions of water security issues. We're in a water, this is just kind of I feel like this is a bit complicated. We're in the Little Colorado River watershed, one of two in Arizona that have not had their water rights adjudicated yet through the state. That's happening now in our watershed. And it takes a lot of collaboration between tribes and parties, Salt River Project, City, Flagstaff, Winslow, all the communities.
Does everyone know what water adjudication means?
Well,
I don't know if everybody's familiar with it. I know we're all Southwestern people, but I just want to be sure.
I think you should just like quickly define it.
the state's court process for assessing a water right. So there are a lot of claims to water rights that have not gone through a process under a judge to issue, now you have your water rights. There are folks that are first in time, first in right. There are downstream users that are impacted by upstream users. So it's very complicated. These can take decades to resolve these adjudications. And so to me, this means partnering through an organization like the Coconino Plateau Watershed Partnership. We get together once a month. Actually, David back there is part of the partnership. And we talk through what's happening with water rights that impact all. So that's really a powerful way to stay engaged and to stay friendly, I feel, as these things are happening to these adjudication process, let's say.
Is that a fair analogy, Aaron, to say it's like mediation instead of like a court hearing in a lot of ways? Like it's our way to have it be a more open conversation and we hopefully go someday to the court in agreement on what should be happening.
Yeah, it's a very informal mediation, you know, and there's a more formal mediation that some cities like Flagstaff and others take by sitting down with our lawyers and drafting water rights settlement agreements that are then grabbed by the court process and folded into that. So if you can mediate ahead of that process, then the state's not telling you how much water you have, if that makes sense. So,
All right, so I also am concerned of water security when it comes to, is it 27,000 square miles or 20,000 square acres, the sea aquifer?
boy, that's a big question. I don't know.
Anyhow,
It's huge.
Square miles.
Eh,
Square miles.
anyhow,
Very far away.
just to, to add a graphic orally.
To the Mobium rim.
Yeah, so when I think about water security, I think about some number that was once thrown at me that could be or could not be the truth of, well, we'll just say lots of mining claims that are out there on the Navajo reservation and beyond, that I also, not knowing anything about how aquifers work, am concerned that possibly that they could affect our water. So that's a valid question. Do you feel like your question was answered or
Well,
this discussion enough?
Stated, because I think that we've talked about allocation, we've talked about partnerships, we've talked, and And I guess maybe this part of it by saying, we have to protect Flagstaff first and foremost. We have to protect Flagstaff and its resource. Yes, we need to be fair with our neighbor. But when this said security, I'm like, that really mean? You guys have restated it well. But I still don't know that word means in relationship to this as a partnership. You know, I understood everything he said. But this security, you know, especially because you're right. It was in the paper that the Red Gap Ranch was part of the set, was potentially part of the settlement. We're gonna give them 100,000 acre feet of water. We just have to be careful in how that's allocated. You know, let's say it gets settled tomorrow. For example, we going to protect the 100,000 acres of water that we have to give them, even though they can't get it for 5 years. You know, and that is probably more of a political discussion and maybe not appropriate for here, but I think that we actually need to be thinking about it. And if security in a roundabout means that we will give all our partners that are part of the settlement, we need to then be concerned by what it says. There needs to be an equitable distribution, an equitable trade, and all of it in order for the security of our water.
And Abel, I think that there's a fact in that article that.
Well, the red gas portion would be 1,000 acre feet,
What did I say?
100,000.
Oh, yes, that 1,000. I'm sorry.
If everyone's in the 100,000, that would be security, but yeah.
I heard that earlier and I went and did the math and I was like, wow, that is a big deal. Okay, so does everybody on the committee feel that the security of our water supply is reflected in the plan? I guess would be the question I ask, and I can go with Tina, please.
I just have you went right to the only thing I had a question of almost all night long, because I worked on adjudication. So when you're going to talk about adjudication, it takes so long, and we're talking about 2 watersheds, which is our watersheds. What's that going to do to the overall decision making? How long does that take? How does that work? Because most people aren't going to understand what you mean by it takes a long time. It could be decades. Well, what is what did that really mean?
Well, yeah, what does that mean to the security of water for Flagstaff and neighboring?
And the overall water supply? Yeah, just a question.
Yeah, I don't. So there's the physical production of water from our aquifers by Flagstaff and surrounding communities. And to me, security is getting the partners together to keep tabs on it together and to go, utilize the US Geological Survey tools that are available. Discuss as a partnership, what is security to our people, our region? What kind of withdrawals are just too much on the aquifer where we impact spring flow to Sterling under areas. So I feel that's what we can do in the regional plan, and then the adjudication process, that just works itself out. But through the partnership, the agencies are involved. ADWR can tell any community water system, like, hey, make sure you file your groundwater well, when it's not filed, or what, they help secure, the information discussion. So I don't know if I really addressed your question. The adjudications to me are just like.
It's an outside the scope kind of thing right now, because you're brought up AWR, so that's a different thing altogether. I just wanted to say it because somebody threw out, well, it takes decades. Well, yeah, I get that, but.
Is the issue the word security? Is there a way of just writing this differently? Because what this really, another key component of this is that it's really looking at maintaining regional cooperation. Because fundamentally, we all have an interest in this water. Some may have an even greater interest than we do. So this matter of communicating with one another and trying to reach an agreeable solution all around is pretty important. What if it just, I mean, it does change it, but what if we changed it to continue partnerships that include blah, 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 and then what it winds up doing is something I think maybe we can all agree on, and we're working towards regional opportunities for water supply evaluations and solutions for long-term sustainability of water sources and environmental flows. So it's really sending the message that my sense is that this was about recognizing the regional nature of water, and that there are a lot of people that are going to make claim to it. We have to work with those people.
The answer is yes, and because a lot of people are wanting a piece of that.
Right.
And so we do have to work with them equitably. And that's where that security is coming from. And rewrite it a little bit and make it just a little bit more clear. I'm fine with that.
I think that's a really good point. I know that dived us down into talking about goals, policies, and strategy.
That's good. That's
I put notes on that.
to go there.
But I'm gonna go into something else because I have a suggestion. This doesn't have anything to do with Red Cap Ranch. Thank you, everybody. Throughout this chapter, there's a lot of information about water, period. Reclaimed water, gray water, recycled water. It's all through the chapter. And I learned more than I ever thought that I wanted to know.
Yay.
The point of it, and it's already happening in part of Flagstaff. My last suggestion is this, that reclaimed water be piped to every part of 1940 or the 2045 is that reclaimed water be piped to every house in Flagstaff.
Okay, and I was just wondering what staff felt about that. If you could tell us. What's the history?
The history in the 90s, when the Rio de Flag water reclamation plant was built exclusively to provide purple pipe water to golf courses, parks and schools, the larger irrigation on Flagstaff. So there's a main trunk line that is in the shape of a C around the city from like East Flagstaff and Continental up to Thorpe and south to Pine Canyon. That trunk line hasn't really been expanded on. A few residents have tapped into it, but you know, I am just speaking, we have a new water services director, so you know, I don't know what his take is on it, but to double plumb purple pipe to all residents would be really expensive when there's already infrastructure in the ground. And I know some communities do it. Tucson is a really great example of purple pipe plumbing to like all toilets. I don't know if it's all residential, but at least commercial. So I don't see that it's really feasible to do that myself with how we're already built today, you know, adding the infrastructure and after the fact. That's just my.
So there was a really, I think there was a really good discussion on purple piping. Thinking that Coral was either the mayor, I'm sure she was the mayor, and I remember the discussion got really deep, and that was the outcome. There was a lot of people on the council that wanted for purple piping to go everywhere, and they explained to them that it just wasn't actually feasible, shy of digging up every single street in Flagstaff, which is, I mean, I guess it's feasible, but it doesn't seem, they didn't seem like it was very practical once, because somebody had the same idea you did in that council. They really felt strong about that. So how does the committee feel about this?
Anthony, I just want to let you know that Walter also has his hand up.
Okay, sorry, John's been over here. He probably has a sore arm by now.
One thing I would like to comment on relative to this in terms of the partners that the city works with You have to consider the fact that the county cannot, in any manner, regulate groundwater. So
Currently,
decisions are made. You know, we are no assistance in that. However, it will take legislative changes, change that. So, um, this is all very well thought out city, but I know some of the problems we have with groundwater use in the county make it very difficult, and some things could get undermined. Now, changes in legislation, it would be far better to lobby legislation to take care of the problem. I don't know, for some people here in the county, an active water management area would not be acceptable, but it takes time to change attitudes. So, you know, you have to consider things like that. Just wanted to throw that out so you're aware of it.
Excellent. Are you done with your comment? Robert, you had another comment.
You asked for comments about purple piping. It is very expensive. It is, something that's a great idea. You also have to remember, the only thing you can really use it for is water in your yard and in your toilet. And so your conservation end more than makes up for the extreme cost, because you have to realize that it's not just the pipes in the ground, it's also the infrastructure to pipe it or to pump it and to store it. And you want a 500,000 gallon tank in your backyard. Most people don't. And those tanks, when we put in new subdivisions, if you're in the wildland urban interface, there are already very, very expensive requirements for the water that you have to have. And adding even more to that kind of exacerbates our cost of living here. Everything that we do and every new code that you add makes it tougher to buy a house here.
Okay, yeah, I get that. And then, Paul,
So I think also purple piping to everybody's backyard, as you kind of led to this, it would encourage people to plant things that we've stopped planting. So we've gotten much more wise in our water use by being frugal rather than, oh, no, it's purple pipe, turn it on. It just feels logically inappropriate. And then I guess also I feel then it would take away, we have two lovely wetlands, one at I-40 and we have a Picture Canyon. So if we purple pipe it all, what happens to those? I don't know if I want to find out.
so people keep talking about this Picture Canyon thing when I remember it called something completely different. Is it the same as Sewer Falls?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Out there to-
Yeah.
Good name, Minnesota.
Somewhere.
Oh, sorry.
I just want to remind you that Walter still has his hand up.
Oh, yeah, and we're getting to Walter. We
Okay,
can
I just-
take care of everybody in the room. And it was just because of the order of the hands that were raised.
Oh, I didn't, sorry, I was
So-
more focused on that.
So Walter?
Yeah.
Bring him in.
Walter,
Yeah, thank you. I think we're still talking about the need for having an alternative source to supplement the water needs within this proposed plan. So what I guess maybe it's there somewhere. Maybe it's already the scientific data that I know that when it comes to looking at projections, a lot of times the census is used. The census is used to make projections based on historical trends. So my question was more about if why don't you go to the circle graph that provides the percentages of water use as it is in 2022. So if we could see the percentages that would be needed, similar to using this graph for let's just say every 5 years, or I don't know if every year would be too cumbersome, but through the rest of the remaining planning period to have it based on historical trends. So I know that the influence for the city is, there's anticipation that possibly industrial and commercial use could be increased more besides just the population growth. So I was thinking that if we could see something like that, and then also hear the USGS report, the study that they did, that would help us to determine. And I'm curious about, okay, how long will this current model right here, this current graph, apparently what we're saying is by these sources that are being used right now, it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable now. But what would make it so that it could be close to sustainable if you were to increase the percentages without that alternative source, one without the alternative source and another with the alternative source. So that I think that would be helpful. It would be certainly a useful planning guide, at least for me, because I'm very visual. And looking at this graph here, it really does help me to understand what sources are being used right now and what sources we rely on right now. And then if other sources are brought in, which percentages will go down and by how much, So we were talking about recharge, what is the annual recharge even because sustainability to me is making sure that there's adequate recharge in each one of those aquifer um, um, I don't know, basins. I guess we could call it basins. And then that would be helpful. And I think that would be helpful. I know this whole litigation issues probably has a life of its own. But for planning purposes for us, I think it would be helpful to me if I saw more information that would be that can serve as a guide to come to a consensus on later on. That's
Sarah?
it. Thank you.
Thanks, Walter.
Thank you, Alter. That, so Aaron and I quickly sidebarred on your comment there because we have pieces of the data it would take to create that kind of graphic. But some of that depends on the preferred scenario discussion that the committee is going to have at the next meeting. So I can put this in the parking lot, I think. And after we talk about the preferred scenario and we kind of get that a little more better dialed in, I think Aaron and I could go look through the data and see if we can pull something closer to what you're asking for together or not. But I think we've got to land better on the preferred scenario before we try and answer that question. Is that a good place to put your comment for now, Walter?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much.
No, it's a
Yeah.
very good thought. We just might need to noodle on it a little, as Aaron stated.
Thanks for the comment, Walter. Even comment. So anybody have any other comments on where we're at here right now? Okay, so Sarah, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I was wondering if you, or any other staff member wanted to read David's comment? Or,
David Hayward's comment? Is
Yeah.
that what you're asking? Sure, let me pull it up really quick. Yeah, so David Hayward, who's our chair, sent a email because he's out today that said, unlike issues in other parts of the state and parts of California are seeing largely because of their reliance on the Colorado River, Flagstaff doesn't have a shortage of water caused by drought. We do have a 100-year assured water supply. And that said, for environmental reasons, continuing the strong trend that Flagstaff has in water conservation is still an important issue. Furthermore, moving water from Red Gap Branch will be very expensive, so reducing dependency on that source is also a good idea. So I think we've talked through a lot of that comment.
Yeah, does the committee have any more comments about this? I think we'll be moving right on directly to the policies and guidelines. And now I know why David goes there first. I was trying to be inclusive, but I think this inclusivity of everything and all is going to take us into 10 o'clock, which is fine by me. I got all night.
Well, I think that these are more technical chapters, so thanks everyone for, hopefully the questions help us move through this faster.
Yeah, and I think that this is the only time, not the only time we're going to be able to talk about this, but it's a crucial time. So it's important to talk about this regardless of how long we have to stay here. And everybody's drinking coffee. Okay, we'll be moving on to the first goal, which is, and I'm not sure, I don't remember how David did these, but I think he just read them off. Balance water demand and water supply for social and economic well-being while supporting a sustainable regional hydrology and meeting ecosystem needs. Is everybody okay with that one? Okay, Robert?
How would we know when we've achieved that goal?
I think that goal's in constant balancing act, like, so it is like, that's kind of the objective of the Water Commission and the City Council and the Board of Supervisors, but you're right, I think it's, as Tina said, it's through adjudication, it's through all these different processes, it takes decades and decades to get to that answer.
So does this help the city craft policy or law?
I'll look at you.
Well, so that's a goal. We're not at policies yet. But the question is still stated. Okay.
The question is still stated that this is as ambiguous as a lot of the goals, which creates a problem in implementing or trying to attain the goal.
Like that.
And unfortunately, I don't have a better solution for it yet.
Okay.
I think a few of these don't have any type of end game. Like how do you know if you've got, how do you know if you've achieved the goal?
Good question. Does the committee have any other comments on that?
I completely agree with your point, except there is an element of a goal that is aspirational. And so reconciling having an element of forward aspiration when you don't know what the future is going to look like with, I agree with you, some sort of measurable outcome is an incredibly difficult balancing act. But I guess I'd like to express, I am somewhat comfortable with it being a little stretch and aspiration.
I agree with the aspiration.
Yeah.
I think that we should aspire to do some of those things. Thinking about it, if we took the aspirations and put those into policies, that might help.
That's a good point.
Any comments on that comment?
Goal writing is challenging in different contexts, like strategic plans, like the 10-year housing plan or the carbon neutrality plan tend to use what's called a SMART goal, which are measurable and attainable. But the regional plan is a way longer time horizon and often sets like the higher, more aspirational level one. And it's not necessarily, most comprehensive plans don't focus on or have measurable goals. They have goals that are thought of as like a desire, like the Forest Service in their forest plan calls them desired conditions. Which I think sometimes is better language. It's just not language we use in local government planning. But if you read the Coconino National Forest Plan, instead of goals, they have what they call desired conditions. So here's what we hope the future will look like. This is what we're hoping to get right. And that is like the way most general and comprehensive plans write their goals. Where if we were working in a more strategic plan document, SMART goal, which I think is kind of what you're referring to, is like, how do we know we achieved a goal? Tends to be more of the writing style. And that's just a style difference between different kinds of.
So the plan that's just underneath this one would be our water.
Yeah, our utilities master plan would be the strategic plan that works underneath.
May have more actionability inside of its goals. And we need to be looking at it a little bit more broad and overarching, since we're not going to be speaking to particulars when we're dealing with future councils or future developers. We just want to point them in the direction where they can find that next plan that has bigger goal. So knowing that you already knew that, Robert, I'm wondering what you suggest we do about this.
Well, I'm looking at this and we have one resource management goal. And that is to balance. And I'm leaning more towards what we've been discussing here, that our goal is to secure water. To secure enough water. And what I really liked was the strategy in the parking lot that maintain a ADW 100-year adequate water supply. Because that's kind of like the gold standard that I'm reading. That 100 water, and if we moved that strategy to actually be the goal.
I think that's struggle for the county because as John said, the county is legally prohibited from requiring adequacy in water in subdivisions in the county until such time as the legislature considers and passes different process similar to AMAs, which there have been bills proposed about that today. And some of that moves really quickly. Like today, this morning, the first news on my phone was that the EPA passed new PFAS regulations, which is already makes my chapter out of date. Was my first thought this morning. I thought, well, I said there's no regulations. Now there are. Hooray. So some of that does move pretty quickly. And I know Aaron might have some thoughts to add.
Can there be a county goal and then a city goal?
We can do that if that's how we want to organize it. It'd be more readable.
Just applying to the county area that's within the regional planning area. It's not applying to the rest of the county then. I mean, while the county comprehensive plan is also being updated simultaneously, I mean, shed some light on that process, but John probably has pretty wise to say.
Aaron,
I'll wait and hear what John has.
go ahead, John.
Just to comment on that, since you brought up the county, I would like to point out that this policy is very much the same as what was worked out during the development of the recent Donny Park area plan. And aspirational, because of our position in the county that I explained a little bit earlier. Nevertheless, wound up stating the same thing. The Donny Park area plan, of course, is well within the regional area boundary. So I think that having some compatibility in terms of aspirational goals is a very good thing, because it makes it much easier when we get down to looking at this in terms of adopting this as a part, as an amendment to the county's comprehensive.
Oh,
We do have in the energy chapter, I hopefully get to tonight before it gets too late, a bifurcated goal. And that is new. Our current plan, we never bifurcated the goals. We are strongly committed to having goals that were the same for the city and the county, even if we set different goals or more aggressive goals in other strategic documents. So it seems like that is open for discussion, or recommendation from the committee tonight, knowing that staff can support that, and it will be ultimately up to supervisors and city council to decide that they like that approach or not.
Yeah, I can give you a comment on that one. I happen to be going over that this afternoon, the exact same thing, about how you make the goals and policies and regional plan compatible with and complementary to what is in the the comprehensive plan for the county, well as its area plans. And I think you've hit on the solution right there. Because one of the other things I considered and thought that I would talk to people about is the fact that if you don't do that, we could get down to the point where it happened in 2013, suggestions by the Planning and Zoning Commission for recommendation to the Board of Supervisors said, well, we can't forward a recommendation for approval. We need to rewrite a whole bunch of things. And the other option is very simply statement during the adoption process that says, okay, here is the order of precedence that has to be used when the county evaluates parts of this plan, areas in the regional plan that are not in the city, but within the county jurisdiction. So that sounds like a much more equitable, reasonable way to approach it. And I'd be fully in favor of that. And it doesn't have to be so wide ranging, I think, as some people might think.
Like, we could bring back a version of WR1 that is split for the city and county so that we can raise up that 100-year water supply adequacy for the city and find some language that also works for the county areas, given their current ability to regulate, knowing that that may or may not change as well.
I know Aaron was gonna say something, but Walter had a question in the chat, and I think Aaron, you might be able to incorporate an answer into it, and it was, how is the city meeting the system needs? Are they the same?
There's an agreement with the Arizona Game and Fish. The city exchanged a parcel of land from Game and Fish. With a commitment of 200 gallons per minute on average release from our Rio to Flag water reclamation plant and the Wildcat Hill. So that's an example of where we're meeting ecosystem needs, but it's through an agreement. We have no commitment or no regulatory commitment to meet any. I don't know if I can't think of any. That's just not what it takes, having agreements like that, I feel. We're pledging to, I don't know, say anymore.
Walter, did that answer your question?
Go beyond.
Yeah, I just wanted to see an example. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Walter. Isn't fun. Do you have something, Paul?
No, I just, it's been going so many ways, it's all balled up. So we are going towards this idea of the two-tier, city county. Okay. Which I think is good.
We'll have to bring that back, much like we did with RS12, where we'll give you a memo and say, here's what we came up with.
The committee content with this? I'm content with it. So we're moving on to policy WR1. Manage coordinated infrastructure and partnerships that support water, stormwater, wastewater, and reclaimed water utility facilities that are safe, secure, reliable, cost-effective, and adequate for future growth and continued health of the Flagstaff region. Committee? Oh, Michelle, thank you.
I had a comment. I think this is a great policy. I wanted to add in here something about the water utility facilities or providing technology that reduces greenhouse gases or renewable energy, or lower energy. This is something that I think is already happening, maybe in a proposal for a grant proposal to decrease the greenhouse gas use at one of the treatment plants, Jenny?
Yes.
Yes. So it seems like a good thing to put in here because that would correspond this policy to the carbon neutrality plan, which talks about reducing greenhouse gases. Be adding a word or two. I'm not sure exactly what the words are. But
Wordsmith it. I like the idea.
Could it be added as an implementation guideline? Said, because I think it fits the cost-effective, reliable
what do you think it does?
terminology.
Cost effective.
Because it's cost-effective to be
Yeah.
doing our energy production site.
Overlay.
Big Yeah.
This anyway, there's overlap. Yeah, so I'm fine with that. If that implementation guideline.
Yeah, just a question. Does David usually go for the implementation guidelines word for word as well, or do you just agree with them? I'm not sure how he ran this part of
I
it.
don't think he went through all of them. I think he just asked, were there any comments on the implementation guidelines?
So if you're comfortable with that, Michelle, it looks like the committee kind of had some head nods and nobody was, looking like they were getting mad at me over it. So we'll move forward with that. And then the implementation guidelines, we have two of them stated here. I could read them word for word if you'd like. If not, we can just say that they're okay the way they are, or you have comment on them, and I'll give you just a moment to read them. Okay, Michelle.
I have two.
Good.
Suggestions for definitions. 100-year water adequacy. I don't know if that's on the list. I couldn't find where the list is. But, that seems like it'd be good to have. And then, well, actually, it's only one. There was, this one used to have the word conservation in it. And I don't really know why that was taken out. So that's more of a question for staff, maybe why the word conservation was taken out of that. Because that seems, we're talking about 100-year water assets. Want to make sure we have conservation too. And then the other thing on bullet number 2 on this one is definition of ecosystem services. Seems like that would be good to define because I know what that is, but I was trained as a biologist, so easy, right? The other thing is that this guideline used to talk about protection of springs. And now it talks only about like protection of pond water. So is there a reason? I didn't actually find in any of these guidelines the word springs. Even though in our little, the memo that you sent out, Sarah, it talked about, hey, there was some discussion about taking out springs, but it's really important to keep it in for various reasons. I didn't see it in here. Maybe I've missed it, but.
There's not springs language in the policies implementation guidelines, but there is in the earlier sections, and we do have policies about springs and resource stewardship. So I think there was not a need to repeat our policies about springs in this chapter.
It's already in resources.
Yeah, but I'd be happy to look at it again if you want to if we want to look at it and make sure the ones that we did back 2 meetings ago when we were thinking about resource stewardship are meeting the context you're thinking of here.
Is it bad to have it in both chapters?
I'm working on reducing duplication. So yes, I do hand slap that.
It seems like springs fits into both.
Right, but if it's covered in one place in the plan, it's covered. It doesn't really matter what chapter it's in. It has been very clunky for planners to have the same policy worded 5 different ways in an entire plan. Please spare us 10 more years of that.
So as long as it's in the other chapter.
It says about the spring stewardship, is that what you're referring to?
There is some language on spring stewardship and the strategies, like the monitoring piece, but there's more about springs in the natural resources and the resource stewardship chapter too.
It's work, Tina. Pulled springs right out of the whole plan.
This is where I think this is one of those topics where seeing the whole plan, we will get a second look at that topic.
I've been feeling that way a lot. Like I wish I could see the other chapters.
I haven't written them yet, but I'll put in here, track springs language across chapters and.
Are you comfortable with that?
Totally comfortable.
Okay, then
Everybody comfortable with that?
Yes.
we'll be moving on then to policy WR2. Require and incentivize water conservation and other water efficiency measures to protect water resource, support projected community growth, and reduce the cost of water systems. How does everybody feel about that for a policy? Looks like most people are not complaining yet. Complaints, going once, twice. Moving on. Now we're looking at the implementation guidelines. I'm expecting you guys to read those independently so we can move through this a bit quicker. Oh, Rick, how's it going?
Good.
What do you think?
Well, I think I'm right where you are. I want to talk about the second implementation guideline.
Sure.
Technically, I don't understand what it means.
Okay. So as soon as staff gets done with their conversation, or we could talk to about it as a committee. But if anybody has any advice on that.
Aaron was just noting there was a factual error on something that, or there could be a factual error on one of the implementation guidelines that I need to double check. So
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, staff. We're looking at the second implementation guideline down from WR2, starts with private or public.
Mhm.
We wanted a definition for the entire guideline.
Basically, I don't understand why you want to limit that and what it means to limit it even.
Unavailable. Okay.
Spaces.
Are we saying we don't want to have require irrigate? I guess I don't really get it at all, so.
Okay. I'm hoping staff can help me with that.
So when we think about green spaces, whether they be on public and private property, some of them require irrigation like turf. And some of them can be maybe irrigated in the short term from a landscaping standpoint, and in the long term, they become a permaculture on their own. And so I think we're just saying that if the green space will require, and maybe it's ongoing irrigation, because almost all plantings require short-term irrigation in our climate. That we should be limiting it to things that have a beneficial use and encourage irrigation efficiencies. So that's pretty much how we're trying to define it. But I think maybe if in that case, if it's confusing, it might be because there's a difference between these like little spit, irrigation that we put in and then might, go out of service over time, but it doesn't matter because the plants are there and they continue to grow versus ones that have a sprinkler that turns on all the time. We are much more restrictive on that than like other cities are. You probably saw in the news this summer that Scottsdale is like pulling lawns out because they weren't as proactive on that as Flagstaff has been.
You can ask your question. I'll get to you, Robert, in just a sec.
And I was wondering if this was intended to keep these spaces from being parks. But you're not gonna irritate ground and create a a beautiful grassy soccer meadow, say. But that's not where you're going.
No, yeah, we will have green spaces in parks, but we don't design our parks in Flagstaff to be wall-to-wall grass. We provide grass where we want a playing field or it's got a recreational or an ecosystem.
See, you went at ease, Rick, so you're pretty happy with that explanation?
I'm confused. I'm trying to sort it out in my own brain.
So I'm gonna let Robert speak so that maybe he can help tie some loose ends.
Rick, are you as thrown by the last two words of that sentence as I am when it says when available? That kind of like, that's throwing that negative at the end of the sentence and just, it seems out of filter.
I think the when available was only meant to modify the phrase, the use of reclaimed water. Because as Aaron explained, throughout the region, there's only a certain area that actually has purple pipe. Maybe we just need to say, and when available, reclaimed water. That's like a flat.
My other comment is that I do support green spaces being irrigated when they need to be. And I think that that's what this is saying. And part of why we don't have a lot of green spaces that are irrigated is because it's very expensive water here. And we already have that culture. And I don't think that our planning documents need to get too into the weeds with what they can't do.
Thank you for that comment. I support that comment as well. It's a breath of fresh air to hear that point of view on this part because I didn't come up with that idea myself. So besides that, I don't, okay, Rick, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry,
Bring it.
I'm still stuck here because the use of the word private in there bothers me. We're talking about a public space. What is the circumstance in which you would irrigate public space for private benefit?
Yeah, I don't think that's what that's saying. It's saying sometimes green spaces like golf courses are private and sometimes they are public, like soccer fields.
We also require private open space.
Okay, I'm sorry.
subdivision. So it's saying in that instance,
Thank you.
it should only be used, so, yeah.
Now, just because a green space is created, it doesn't always get dedicated to the city, especially in new subdivisions.
I just forgot the first word of this.
Hey, Rick, I'm with you on that. And when we come to the energy portion of this, I want to use the light bulb that just went on over my head to power this whole event. So besides that, we're pretty good, committee?
I'll work on rewording that one.
Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate it. We'll move on to policy WR3, maximize the beneficial use of all sources of water by implementing water reuse programs. I thought that one was pretty cut and dry, but then again, I'm not the water expert. So, okay, so we're moving down to the implementation guidelines. If you guys wanted to peruse those momentarily. And dream about a break while you're doing this. That's not my way of saying do it quickly. Everybody's cool with the implementation guidelines? Okay, so policy WR4 reserved urban growth boundaries policy under discussion. So that's not something that we're going to do now, Sarah?
No, we need to have a future growth illustration and a preferred alternative or preferred scenario before we can discuss urban growth boundary modifications. So we need to get to June. If you guys are at June and we've got some other answers, we'll bring that back around.
At the pace,
It's too early.
at the pace of this meeting, we should stay here until June.
Oh, don't do that.
Stormwater management goal, WQ, manage watershed and stormwater to address flooding concerns, water quality, environmental protections, and rainwater harvesting. Do we have input on that, committee? Looks good. Okay. Then we're gonna go to the policy, WQ1, protect watershed for water supply needs, flood mitigation, and ecological integrity. That looked good. Implementation guidelines on the following page. Those look good to the people involved. I don't see anybody shaking their head. Oh, Michelle, please.
I had a comment about the final dash or bullet.
Okay.
Talks about,
Administrative floodplain.
no, that's not what I'm.
Okay, so we're on
Oh, I'm in the wrong place.
policy WQ1.
Never mind. I'm in the wrong
Okay.
place.
Then we'll just breeze past that one and move straight to policy WQ2. And that is intercept the minimize contaminants for urban runoff and protect surface water quality in all watersheds. That looks good. And then we're going to move on to the implementation guidelines. Forgive, my eyes are getting crossed right now for some reason. Implementation guidelines, I don't see anybody raising hands, so we'll move on to policy WQ3, maintain and develop facilities to provide reliable, safe, and cost-effective stormwater, wastewater, and reclaimed water services. That look okay, guys? Yeah, okay. Well, then we'll move on to the implementation guidelines. And see anybody raising their hand about that one? Oh, Robert. I'm glad.
Is there any room for discussion on the implementation to consider allowing the city to buy properties that are in floodplains? This is something that's been happening in some other areas that flood. The cities and counties are buying up the private properties instead of trying to mitigate and move the water around those properties.
I don't know if there's anyone from the flood control district in the county on the call, but I know Ed Schenk, our water manager. So I don't know. Ed, have we had any areas or discussions of places that purchasing property for flood mitigation might be applicable.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. It's been looked at, to be honest, since we have a declared housing crisis or housing emergency. That's in direct conflict with that council declared emergency. So we have not moved that forward at this time.
That answer your question, Robert?
It does, no, was asked if there was room for discussion. Put that away.
Okay.
We're all up downtown.
The old sunny side.
And all of Sunnyside.
South.
Very large fraction. We should have thought of that 100.
Where were you?
When they rerouted the real.
Whole nother discussion. Talk about politics. So the strategic parking lot, how did David usually go around about this?
Usually, we didn't go into a lot of detail on the strategic parking lot because this is just a parking lot. It's a list that staff has that we just want you to see that we're working on strategies.
That's what I thought.
The last meeting we have before we go on a break while the whole plan is getting assembled and put through internal reviews and legal review. We'll be going back and looking at all the strategies from all the chapters together and prioritizing them, and then also thinking about what metrics we want to be tracking strategies. So it's really just for you to look at. And I'd say primarily if you have comments on it, unless you think they need a group discussion at this time and can't wait to a later meeting, that you just email them.
Okay, I appreciate that. Was there any other definitions that folks were looking at this part of the plan needed or specifically defined? None? Okay, so before we get off of this one and on to the next one, I want to make sure that I recognize the email sent to us by Brian Bates. And I think that there is some water topics in here. Because of the way, yeah, there's plenty of them. And because of the way the email is structured, I had a hard time kind of understanding and reading it. And I was hoping that staff could go through it and address what was in that email, since it doesn't look like any committee members have anything else to say about it as well.
Right now, or you want us to do that at a later?
No, after, I think it would be fine. And if you guys came up with anything after, we could bring it back around next time. If that works. I feel like we're at an endpoint. I'm looking at staff. Yeah, and I'm also wondering if we needed to take a break. Okay, so we're gonna meet back here at 8 o'clock, which gives you 5 minutes to take a break.
Have our undivided attention.
Oh, yes. Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye. All Regional Plan Committee 2045. Let me make sure I'm in the right.
Turkey legs.
Okay, now that I got you guys' attention, I need to catch up to that really quick. So while I'm looking for what I'm supposed to be doing at the moment, I wanted to ask the committee, so the way we did it last time by going through the emails first was clunky. I felt it was clunky, but I did that because of a conversation I had with, with many of you and also staff on how to make sure that, we have everybody's feels like they're heard and seen and all that good stuff. Do you guys want to go through that process again, or do we want to do the David method and just go straight to the goals and policies and infuse our emails into those goals and policies? Anybody? I like emails first. You want to do emails? Sounds good to me. Okay.
I kind of like the other way, but I haven't experienced the other way yet, so. But just because I'd like to see more discussion on some of the actual points, and I feel like we're going fast, and I know we're gonna reveal more.
Susie, how do you feel?
It seemed like in the past, we haven't talked about the stuff that is before. the
Felt that way
policies and
too.
stuff. And I'm glad we're getting to talk about that. I was worried. that
Yeah.
we weren't gonna get to talk about it.
From a chair's perspective, it's a little, I guess, it is. I feel a lot of pressure to rush through this because I feel like people are getting bored. But I want you to
We don't know
know
what
that,
hair raising means.
yeah, we don't. But I'm here for the discussion as long as it takes, and I hope that staff and the rest of the committee is as well, because these are very important decisions that are going to be made in an hour and a half of our time, plus some other discussions. But we should take time to air this stuff out. So I'm good with that. Now I got to figure out who sent emails about this stuff.
No, Tom did, and he had some comments.
Yeah,
Emails, but no, you didn't have any energy comments. So, at least internally. And then I know there are some people who are here for public participation tonight who also provided some written comments, including one from Dr. Stephen Somer over there, who provided his comments late enough that if you don't have your phone or email up, you might not have seen it yet.
So this is one thing that I was curious about from the committee, and something that I really like about this the way council does it is how they take the public comment first. And I know we haven't done that in the past, but it kind of helps get that out of the way. I know we have public comment for the end and we didn't want to get tied down in that. But how does the committee feel? Do you want to just keep it like we have been doing it, take public comment at the end for both of the subjects? Because I feel like we missed a lot of public comment for the water subject. Get it in the end and we're like, oh, sorry, buddy.
Might be advisable because it's late and I
Yeah,
don't know if the
just to get to
who came of their own volition tonight can stay past original
their bedtime.
time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's my bedtime too.
I'd vote for having public comment at the beginning. Just so that we could kind of be primed on what are the issues from the public.
Okay, all right. And I'm just being glib, but it'll give me time to eat my banana. I appreciate that. So who's here for, and I do apologize to the folks that had water public comment that we didn't do this for. This is something that we're learning as we go, so please bear with us. So who's here for public comment? Our public comment is reserved for time period. Do we have anybody online, Elsa?
We aren't doing public comments.
Oh, yeah, we're not doing online public comments. I remember.
So here, Anthony. Here are the,
Okay.
anybody who checked in this column wanted to speak.
Okay,
And
we have,
I'll set the timer.
all right, thank you very much. And we have John.
Do you still want to do 2 minutes and 30 seconds, or do you want to do 3 minutes? What's your?
3 minutes will be fine for tonight. John? Yep. Want to do some public comment on the energy portion?
Only allowed to comment on energy and I have 3 minutes to do it.
Yes.
Water, you can.
Right. If I can contain both energy and water in 3 minutes, can I do it?
Sure. Yeah, you can stand up if you want, you can sit down, you can stand in front of the group, you're cool with whatever you feel.
All right, for the majority tonight, the solutions that I've seen presented as far as water goes, I don't believe pertain to the actual root causes of the issues at hand. Most of the solutions that I'm seeing are based around how we get more water. Red Gap Branch, potable reuse, etc. These are all ideas based on how we get more water. And there's not a whole lot of conversation about how we better steward our existing water resources that make a substantial difference for our future. Rather than saying this is how much water we have, how do we make it work? We're trying to figure out how we constantly get more water. The mentioned Red Gap Ranch is like City of Flagstaff in a multiple municipality lawsuit against Navajo Nation for their water rights. It's not a cooperative thing. We are forcing our courts to force them to give us shared right of the water, of which is completely not acknowledging their sovereignty at all. And for us to be making actions like that and then preface our whole thing here with land acknowledgements, but then turn around and be like, I know we stole all your land, but we just need that water now too. Rather than focus on why we're in the position that we're in right now, that we don't know how to utilize our resources appropriately, and we drain our aquifers way faster than we can refill. And then as far as energy goes, I don't know what you guys are going to propose tonight, but I see what we've been doing. Things like the wind and solar field out in Babbitt Ranch. This is Next Energy, who recently has been indicted for fraudulent collusion to manipulate the energy market. They've also been cited and fined on multitude of occasions for workers' rights violations, unsafe operations of nuclear facilities, unsafe worker conditions, and on top of all of it, multitudes of ecological infractions, of which are things that we supposedly want to fix here. So rather than like focusing on how I would love to see some focus on how we make new construction more sustainable and have higher performance values. Our local mill processes all of our timber and we can't buy any of it here. It won't build a single house here. All of that timber goes from super far away. That's the kind of stuff we need to start talking about when it comes to energy too. And most of all, for our committee at this very moment to finally address how our current citizens have access to water and sustainable energy for our future generations after we've talked about where we're going to put new houses for people that are trying to escape their own ecological and economic problems from their own area. Doesn't give me a lot of confidence that we're genuinely prioritizing sustainability and a healthy future for us. Thanks.
Thank you very much, John, that you showed up today. And we'll just be moving straight down the list here. So next we have Stefan Sommer.
Thank you, Anthony. Good evening, y'all. How are y'all doing? Everybody still awake? Sorry, I had to run out and come back, but I think that when we talk about sustainability, our climate change future is probably the big issue that we'll face here in Flagstaff and that we'll face in Newport. So I think the goal of net zero by 2030 that's in the current regional plan is probably the most important element in the region because it sets the tone for all the energy questions, as well as it's the only, by reducing our emissions, really the only way we have to address climate change in a way that reduces future risk and future damage. We need to do a variety of other things to protect the community from the effects of climate change, but really that net zero by 2030 goal. And we often talk about climate change, we talk about future risk and things. But climate change is here already. We all know it, just looking out the window, right? We know that our seasons are getting variable in brand new ways. He spoke at a Climate Elders Tell Stories of Change event, and he had talked to all the ranchers in his business and asked them what kind of changes they'd seen. Well, they said, we always had spring winds here in Flagstaff. Now we've got fall winds too. And what that means is we have to haul more water and more feed through the fall and winter to get our cattle through. When you look at the aerial surveys of what our vegetation is doing across Coconino County, Navajo County, et cetera, vegetation productivity has reduced by over 80% on most Coconino County. We'll know some of these effects. Ranchers do it. So I think that that's a key thing for us. It's affecting us now. The effects in the future are projected to be horrendous. If the Economic Policy Institute at NAU just recently put out a report that a catastrophic wildfire affected Flagstaff could reach costs as high as $2.8 billion. So yeah, we worry about fire. In some parts of California, you can't get fire insurance anymore. That's already kind of on the edge of being threatened here. So in the near future, we probably will not be able to buy fire insurance. The effects of climate change on central Arizona, what does that do to us? We talk about climate refugees. Well, all over the world, we see climate refugees, but we also see climate migrants. So we get folks who buy weekend homes or summer homes, and that affects our entire housing market. So it affects us in all sorts of different ways. We need to keep that goal, and we need to implement it as strongly as we can.
Thank you, Stephanie. Next on the list, we have David Spence. David Spence,
Yeah.
welcome.
Good evening, everyone. I am a part of NASCA, Northern Arizona Climate Change Alliance. And one of the areas that we focus on is electrical energy. And I hope the regional plan looking ahead 20 years includes a concept called community source aggregation. What this is the fast road to greening our electric grid. The slow road to greening our electric grid is to just let APS do what they've been doing, which is very gradually and slowly put wind and solar onto the grid. They want to delay that as long as they can because their profits are greater when they're using their nuclear and coal and gas fired plants. So we can depend on APS, our monopoly electric utility provider, to take as long as possible to green our grid. The faster road is the concept of community source aggregation. Now, to be fair, it will require our state legislature to pass enabling legislation. But assuming that can happen in the future, we as a community, be it Flagstaff or the whole region of 500 square miles that's included in the regional plan, parts of Coconino County and all of Flagstaff, or Sedona, Flagstaff, Williams, you could do any sort of aggregation of populations. They would buy under this concept of community source aggregation. The community would buy green electricity from wind and solar providers under a power purchase agreement and then sell that green electricity to APS. APS would continue to own the grid, the transmission lines, the distribution lines. They would continue to own the meters and bill the customers and receive payments. That in the areas of our country, namely 10 states that have this concept in action, The utilities continue to do well. Their shareholders continue to make a profit. The community can use the resource to put in further energy efficiencies, and everybody is happy. So I just urge the committee to include the future possibility of community source aggregation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spence. Michael, did you want to say anything, or you didn't mark on the list, but I heard you say some stuff.
I'm Mike McCauley. Little history on me. I was involved with the local natural resource conservation district for some years. Local, state level. Well, questions that I had in hearing the conversations about water and whatnot. There was little or no discussion to address the watershed management methods to do so. Then I also asked the question during the break, how do you define a watershed? The bigger you get in a watershed, the harder it is to manage. Difficult it is. And I base that on my experience. I'm a rancher. I have a ranch north of Williams. All of my water is by rain on snow. Managed where my water comes from to feed my livestock, or for water my livestock. Some of the things I've seen going on here in Flagstaff with some of the measures they're taking to address the flood issue. They're building these big retention ponds. Are they building them to clean them out? If you don't take the silt out of them over time, they will silt over. Become ineffective, and the problem they'll cause will be worse than what they cause without. That's what the city is doing now. These retention basins cannot be cleaned. That's a serious problem. Might be 20 years down the road, but it's a serious problem. The other thing is with these floodwaters, what you can do when you have a basin, you can drill what's called a dry well. Those waters go into that retention basin, and what you're doing is you're taking it directly to the aquifer instead of having to overflow or run on down. Just some thoughts that I had. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. McCauley. And I just want to remind the people in the room that in the future, if you wanted to be a public speaker, you just check this line on the outside, and that convenience will be afforded to you. Now we'll be moving on. And before we get started, I just wanted to do a quick poll. If this is inappropriate, yell at me. Who here drove tonight to get here? Their own car? Okay. I did too. Matter of fact, on my way here, I was smothered by black smoke by a guy who deleted his DEF in his diesel truck. He was mad at me for going the speed limit, I guess. So there was lots of fossil. You could probably still see it on the hood of my car, the residue from the oil and gas that was just poured all over the place. So, you know, when you delete things that try to keep us safe, that's what could happen as we become unsafe. Now, another thing I wanted to mention quickly is, you know, us putting words into the plan is one thing, but I'm going to take this inwardly briefly and just say that I need to make a change. I should have got to the bus stop at 3:10 today, so I could have been here by 5 o'clock. So I could have helped out and not spread, you know, some of the bad things around. But that being said, we're going to move right along with the emails. And since Mr. Pearson's email is right on top, going to give you the opportunity to speak to the email. I don't know if we have all read it. I don't know if you want to read it.
I'm very old, and so I have the old fashioned way. I have handouts.
Can you talk? Do you want me to do the handouts while you talk? Okay.
I can just pass these down. Take one for myself. So, one of the things I just thought we should address in the energy section of the, thanks very much. Thanks, sir. In the energy section, is the fact that, as we transition to wind and solar from our traditional energy sources, it's not just going from one energy source to another. Making a very fundamental change in the way we produce energy. I try to think back, what was the most fundamental change that was made before this? I think it was really when Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison were debating over AC versus DC power. That occurred back in the 1890s, and obviously Tesla's AC power won the day, and that's what we have right now. Changing over to wind and solar is just as fundamental a change, I believe, because we're going from the system we have now is an on-demand system. The power plants, the nuclear power, even the coal, the natural gas, even the hydropower, they're on demand. That is, they can at any point in time put out their maximum megawatt output. So they're on demand. As we need more power, they can bring on more, crank in more burners, open up more floodgates, whatever, to get the maximum power that's available. When we go to wind and solar, that kind of power is when available power. That is, the sun doesn't always shine, it doesn't always blow. So even though, we're building a 30 or 50 megawatt solar field out there, it's not producing 30 or 50 megawatts. It's producing, nothing at night and more in the day. So the end result of that is that we need to have redundancy. We need to have backup systems. We have to do that. We're already talking about major battery backups for the solar power systems. So I believe that the energy chapter has to address the fact that we're going from one type of power fundamentally to another type of power. And the planners have to prepare for that. We need to have the redundant systems, the backup systems and so forth available to us. And it's up to us to alert them that those backup systems are necessary, the redundant systems are necessary. If we look at what's happening already, my wife owns property in the Big Island of Hawaii, and so we get out there regularly and get news from there frequently. They're well down the road to wind and solar power, but they're already experiencing frequent brownouts and rotating blackouts. Well, if you're in Hawaii, that's inconvenient. But if that's happening to us in February here, the temperatures are, 0, sub-zero, whatever, and we're having rolling. And one other thing I wanted to mention with that is we're squeezing ourselves from both ends. We're having power that is fragile and variable on the one end, creating that. And on the other end, we want to go all electric in order to achieve carbon neutrality by 2030. So we're making ourselves more dependent on electricity while we're creating fragile power. And which is fine, but we need to have the redundant backup systems available to us to support that. And I guess that's the other thing I was going to say is, I think it's important also for us to document exactly, I'm sorry, I forgot your name, but you mentioned the power grid changes and so forth and how they're being changed. I think we need to document what that rate is going to be in in 2030. Is it the slow system or is it going to be the fast system that you propose, sir? We need to have that down there. We need to have those numbers available to us, or our planners do, so that they can make sure that the grid is viable enough to carry it, that the backup systems are available when the power is down, the battery systems are available. So we need to program that or predict that. I realize that it's not a hard and fast prediction, but it should be our best estimates of what we're hoping for now and, or what we're planning for now and, what we would like to have. And then the same with our usage, on the usage side and the power side, the power provision side. You know, how we break it down. These are just, I just made these tables up. We have the pie charts. There are a lot of other ways to graphically do it. But I think we should put the information down there. Just saying we're going to be carbon neutral by 2030 and carbon free by 2050 that's kind of a hand waving thing. We need to document what that's going to be carried out and what the rate is, so that the appropriate redundancies and backup systems and emergency systems are available. And that's sorry it took so long.
No, you needed to say everything. Say it. That wasn't long at all, Tom. That was just fine. So I open this up for discussion with the committee as I considered throwing this into the recycle for a single-use water. And I also want for us all to keep in mind, I guess for myself mainly, to keep in mind that, you know, the planning document that we're dealing with now is kind of overarching. And while many of the facts that you put out here are kind of easily obtainable, I do believe, or at least I'm hopeful that the folks that would be reading this would already know a lot of this information and have plans for it. So I'm not exactly sure how it fits in this plan, and that's why I'm asking the committee to bring forth some ideas on what Tom just had to say. Have any input? Yeah, so we're gonna go with, I thought I saw him first.
I like what Tom has to say. I want to remind the committee that there are trade-offs for all of these different competing ideas. Whether it be community aggregated electrical supply, whether it is wind and solar, whether it is piped water versus rain catch, rainwater harvesting, all of these have trade-offs. Almost all of them more expensive than the way we're doing it now. The reason that we're doing things now and the reason that we're in the problems that we have now is because it was cheap and easy. So we've got to be prepared to make those really hard decisions going forward. Pain involved going 100% electric. Are we ready for the pain involved with going no more cars? Because it's going to be really, really expensive to do the things that we really wanted. Where is the compromise in that? And where do we want to come down on in terms of policy that compromise? And how much do we want to craft our document to show that compromise? I think that's one of our biggest challenges. Power is near and dear to my heart. It's because this year I've been in for a very long time. And I believe that when solar are getting better, bigger, to the point where people are going to start complaining about all the land that is being taken up by solar panels and by wind turbines, and how much infrastructure is needed, because distributed generation, a lot of space, a lot of it, that reflects directly into your cost as a ratepayer. I'll leave it at that. I can go on at length, and I think in a working committee would be the places that we could talk about that.
Thank you for your comment, Robert.
Thanks, Anthony. So I guess my comment is more just to the table. I think this is great information, and I agree that it's really from a regional plan standpoint and what land use planners who are applying the regional plan, what they use, they're not really going to use this information, and we're not going to really develop policy or code from this. Maybe policy, but not code. This is and it's a very, from my understanding, dynamic information. So I'm wondering if instead of writing the actual table, if it's not a reference to the maintaining or being aware of certain information that's available, but just, I just don't think that the table
Well, I think those pie charts are probably better. I really think the timeline needs to be in there, not just for the planners, but for the public. See what is the particular goal. It just doesn't seem to be, to me, to be reasonable to just tell people 2030, we're going to be, here, 2050. And I'm not going to tell you anything, everything underneath that is a mystery. I'm just not going to share that. It's like the secret society, you got to be in to know that. It should be straightforward information. It should be the usage side. The utility office should have those numbers, in their back pocket. APS should have the other numbers. I just think it's essential information to say what the timeline should be, how the flow should go.
So the rest of the committee, I'm looking.
I was gonna ask Jenny if she wanted to respond to some of that.
Nicole also has Nicole Angelopoulos also has her hand raised. Chat.
So I'll stop, but I just thought you were asking questions. I thought you were somebody who might have the relevant. Or not, I
I'll
don't.
let Nicole go first. I'd rather respond to specific questions that y'all have.
Very good. It's all cool.
Nicole, do you?
Yeah, hi, good evening, everyone. Nicole Antonopoulos, Sustainability Director. Thank you for the conversation and the opportunity to chime in on a few things. And I just want to make sure that the committee is fully aware and understands how when specifically focusing on electric utility, that how this works. And in the sense of APS is our service provider. We are a regulated state in Arizona for utilities. And what that essentially boils down to is that the Arizona Corporation Commission, which oversees all regulatory, oversees utilities throughout the state, has provided APS a certificate, which essentially, I think in simple terms, is a mandate to provide service in specific territories within Arizona. Flagstaff and Coconino fall within that territory. Every 3 years, APS puts out a integrated resource plan, which looks at the next 15 years of what they project are going to be the electric needs throughout their service territory. And they build a portfolio based on that. We as a city organization have no influence on that other than public participation. The county is in the same boat. So I think that there may be, from what I'm hearing, some sense of that we have more authority in this space than we do. APS has very clear goals to be 100% clean energy by the year 2050. They are building their IRP around that goal. They are focusing on renewables, battery storage, to Tom's concern. And there's a lot of dynamics within the context of the Western grid that are really important here. And I think there are definitely some folks in the room who have much more expertise in this space than I. But I think we're getting off track here. And please, Sarah and or Michelle, correct me if I'm wrong, but when we're talking about land use and this document being a land use document, our utilities setting a goal for clean energy and their portfolio and their makeup of that energy mix really isn't the point of this chapter. The land use piece is the point of this chapter. Battery storage is a discussion point in my perspective, because we need to understand if there is battery storage, how are we going to address that in terms of land use? If there are going to be, as the county has an ordinance that addresses renewable energy, developments, where does battery storage fit into that context? But as far as the projections of energy use and consumption across the board and the transition to clean energy, that's in APS's IRP, which is approved by the Arizona Corporation Commission, which is Arizona Corporation Commissioners are voted in, and they have that jurisdictional authority where we don't. So I just want to make sure that there's a clear understanding when we're talking about the energy chapter, that at least the discussion so far is not about land use. This is about APS's integrated resource planning. So I just want to make sure that that is clearly understood. And if anyone wants to contribute to that, if I didn't explain it clearly or there's some questions, please let me know. But I am concerned that that is, we're not talking about the land use piece here. Within this context of this chapter. Now, when we talk about aggregated community solar, or community choice solar, as Mr. Spencer mentioned, he is exactly right. That is something that will take a legislative change. And to this point, we've not been able to get that across the finish line. Property assessed clean energy financing, similar. We've been trying to get PACE approved in the state of Arizona since 2009. And we've never been able to get that across the finish line, even though numerous jurisdictions throughout the state would love to see that, and even lending institutions. So I guess if I can offer that as perhaps a redirection to focus on the land use piece, but my sense is, in response to the discussions about the transition that our utility is making, can be referenced in here, but we need to reference the ACC, Arizona Corporation Commission approved integrated resource plan.
Thank you
And I've
for that comment.
yeah, absolutely. And I've hyperlinked, I provided those links to both Unisource's and APS's IRPs. The natural gas utility has to do the same.
Was about to break her arm raising her hand, so if we could move on to her, I would appreciate it.
I was just gonna pair with what Nicole just said. What is the scope of an energy element in a comprehensive or regional plan as defined by the state statute is building and other kinds of energy efficiency is one of the things we are required to include in this chapter. And then the second thing is renewable energy production. So those are the two things they say you must have in an energy element in a general plan or a comprehensive plan. And then, as Nicole said, the kind of silent also is any energy issue that ties into a land use chapter. So if your growth is, or the character or the intensity of your growth means that the energy infrastructure will need to change or transition, that is also kind of a silent part of it, but is typically also included. So, for instance, there were lots of comments in this chapter that I think per the memo I didn't include because they were outside of the scope. And so grid prioritization and even community, I forgot what the term is.
Source aggregation.
Community source aggregation doesn't touch the ground in a way that makes it within the scope of the regional plan. And so those were brought up, but they were not included for being outside the scope. Not that they couldn't be part of some other kind of document or strategy or policy. They're just not a land use policy. We did include information on electric vehicle charging because that is an infrastructure that supports transition, which is included also in the transition that Mountain Line is making to having an electric bus fleet. So there's other parts that kind of tie to some of those, but we do try, and it's not that we can't include anything that's not on the must list. It's just we try and be really conservative about what those included are.
And just to transition, I'll get to you next, Tom. So that was my concern from the beginning. I remember when I first started going to council meetings, Rick Miller reminded me that he said that I've come a long way since back in those days because I had some pretty silly ideas and I thought I knew everything about everything. And what I've learned is that I've learned a lot since then. And if I would have had those ideas when I barely first started here in Flagstaff, thinking I knew about policy now, that it was kind of laughable because I really didn't know that whole much about what I was talking about. But I did want to say what has already been stated by Nicole, that you know, the utilities that we have are really guiding this process. And today Tom happens to be on my far left. And those ideas that come in here, I don't think necessarily address, just like today, Spence is on my far right. And, you know, those ideas don't match the regional plan either. Because this, first of all, the information in this document and the information coming from Mr. Spence is kind of outside the purview for one, but beyond that, this is internalized by the utility already. They know this information. This is nothing new to anybody. Besides maybe some people here at the table might have gotten some enlightenment by it, but it's not going to help a developer move anything anywhere or be in the spirit of where we're at with this document when it comes to energy and land use. That's just what I'm saying as a transition to say, Tom, what do you got?
Well, I think it is fundamental information that should be included, like in a call out box, plus a couple pie charts of distribution, because it is a fundamental change. It's not just going from power source A to power source B. It's a fundamental change in the nature of our energy production that has great ramifications down the road, that cascade down the road. And particularly to us with our winter climate. I mentioned in my little note here that Sweden has a similar winter climate to us. They were going full tilt on wind, solar, and nuclear. They this year, was back in December, made a national decision to not go forward with wind and solar because they're so severe that they risk wind and solar. They're going on nuclear to gain. They still want to be carbon neutral. They're going to go nuclear to do that. I'm not suggesting that we should consider that. I'm just saying that we need to tell everyone that this is a fundamental change that needs to be, that we need to adapt to.
But Walter had his hand up in the chat.
Oh, I'm sorry, Walter. I apologize for not getting to you sooner. Please speak when you're ready.
No, I appreciate the information on the renewable in the industry. So if I'm if I'm hearing correctly, the utility company APS and Arizona Corporation Commission basically have already outlined goals and guidelines for implementing a shift towards renewables. And so I guess I'm just thinking for the city's sake, where I'm curious is when you say that this is not tied to the land. It's not tied to the land. I guess I just need clarification on what do you mean when you say this is not tied to the land? Because even though it's my understanding that even though solar is a non-carbon alternative and it's a good thing, and solar and wind are being developed all over. I'm just curious about the lithium and the battery storage. I don't know how if the city has a position already, as if the lithium industry and market is going to continue to support solar, if I understand it correctly, I mean, I'm not an energy expert, but lithium within the battery storage is just as just as lethal to the environment. So if I guess that's why I'm asking, how are we saying there's no connection to the land? Is there already a policy the city has on disposal? I'm just curious. I'm just kind of trying to wrap my head around this.
Walter, and I didn't introduce myself to the folks that I don't know. My name's Jenny. I work on the climate team in the sustainability office at the city. Walter, thanks so much for your concerns. There's a couple really good points in there that I want to get to. The first is lithium, just because it's a little bit easier than the land use conversation. Well, this will be recorded, so I'll just say it. Everything poops, right? All energy sources have trade-offs. All energy sources have challenges, right? And we are completely aware of that. What we do from the city perspective is listen to the experts who do what's called a life cycle analysis, who look at what are the overall effects, right, of lithium that goes into batteries, right, of coal that goes into things, of natural gas extraction, et cetera, right? You have to look at the entire life cycle and find out, you know, how bad is it, right? And generally, well, not generally, always solar and wind and other renewable sources have found to be less bad, right? Again, there are a lot of different impacts all over the place. Lithium is absolutely a problem. And lithium is also in all of our laptops and all of our phones and all of the batteries in our internal combustion engines, right? There's a lot of different ways that our society uses lithium. And so, you know, industrial scale batteries are one of those ways. That kind of leads us into the conversation about the land, and I'll invite to expand. What we were speaking about when we kind of talk about how does this affect land use? What we're really talking about, and what I think a lot of Tom's concerns relate back to, is the quality of the electricity that comes out of the outlet that's right there, right? That is a conversation that is really important, right? What is on our grid right now? Right now, our grid is about 50% made of renewables and nuclear energy. And you probably didn't know any difference, right? The electricity that comes out of the grid right now and comes out of the outlet that I'm looking at has always come into our homes, luckily, right? With very little consumption. And so the question is, that is not a land use question, the way that we see it from a city staff perspective. How much nuclear is in our electric grid today, right? You may have no idea, right? That 30 years ago, that looked really different before the opening of the Palo Verde plant. I don't know how old Palo Verde is, but Robert probably does. But you know, that is the question, and that's why we say it doesn't impact the land. Our energy uses absolutely impact the land, and I just really appreciate your perspective there, Walter. There are very real concerns from lithium mining. There are very real concerns from solar paving the way across the Mojave Desert right now, right? As are there very real concerns from coal and natural gas and all of these things. But where a lot of the concerns that we've heard from are about, well, that grid, right? What's coming out of that grid, as opposed to how do we think about solar and Flagstaff? That is absolutely a land use conversation. How do we think about wind in the Flagstaff region? That is absolutely a land use conversation. Where do our batteries go? Where do new transmission lines gonna go? Gonna need a lot of, right? That is a very much an energy and a land use conversation, but the characteristics of our electric grid is not a land use conversation necessarily, because that electric grid is controlled by much, much larger forces than the city of Flagstaff region. All perspective.
Single one of the words that was said, we've talked about being reasonable, redundancy. There's going to be a fundamental change. Expensive. What I'm going to ask you to think about right now really doesn't have anything to do with the grid either. It has to do with the cost to seniors. The cost of natural gas by my understanding, by my research, is 2 or 3 times smaller than electricity. In other words, electricity costs 2 or 3 times more. If we're forced to retrofit, if seniors are forced to retrofit from gas because it's cheaper to electricity, you know, an all cooking stove that's electricity, does that senior get that much? In Flagstaff, that's already expensive. And that's where these keywords come into, you know, let's be reasonable. Let's have redundancy. You know, the wind, the solar, the hydroelectric, you know, the atomic power, all of it. Let's have the redundancy, but let's leave a little bit of the gas. And let's not create, you know, go rush into this and say, okay, we can no longer supply you so you can run your gas cooking stove. Heater. And that by itself doesn't fit in this. It doesn't. But are we going to want to have the public at large approve this plan? The answer is yes. You do need to have something in here that says, okay, we are moving to clean energy. Let's not do it all at once and boom, here, you all of a sudden poof, you have to pay for a brand new stove that just, and we just bought one, $1,000. I have to buy another one that costs electricity, you know, that's electricity. Where do I get the money? We're retired. And there's a lot in that situation. So my point is not against clean air, not at all. A little bit of reasonableness in getting there. Don't say city council or, and I'm saying here, how about if we put a little bit of information about the cost of electricity versus keeping gas, so that you can make an informed decision whether to, if you're a Flagstaff citizen, you want to prove this. Because that's what all we're doing. We're trying to get all our thoughts in there, you know, from different avenues, from a lot of different areas, so that we can basically get a wholesale approval of this plan. That little piece in there, but other pieces of information in there, that, so that you can make an informed decision.
Litznopolis has her hand up. She may have.
Sure. I'll just chime in while we're moving over there. And I think you bring up a good point of when it comes to costs, you know, what is this going to cost dollar wise? There are so many costs beyond money. Talking here. Way beyond money. I just want to throw that out there.
And actually, I was just talking about
that. Yeah,
plain and simple.
Yes, and I'm moving that conversation this way, and we're going up to Nicole. What's going on, Nicole?
Hi, thank you. I believe that was Abel who was just speaking. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that question and comment, Abel. I want to make sure that it's clear when we're focusing on the strategies that are identified in the carbon neutrality plan that there is no regulatory element of our goals to focus on electrification. So I want to make sure that that's clear. That's actually illegal in the state of Arizona. So there will be no mandates that individuals have to build new construction with only electricity. Equally so, there will be no mandates that individuals have to switch out current appliances. Our strategies, however, in the carbon neutrality plan, and Jenny can really elaborate on this, is to focus on encouraging individuals when they can and when they are considering changing out through attrition their appliances. And some people choose to do it even if there is no end of life that their appliance has met, to electric for a wide variety of reasons, some for health reasons, and others because they feel that this is the right thing to do. All of that in mind, our programming is aligned and focused on assisting our community members in making that transition. So I just want to make sure that it's clear that there's no regulatory authority that any city or county jurisdiction can have in the state of Arizona that dictates what type of energy source is utilized in new construction. So that's a land use conversation, absolutely. So I want to make sure that's clear. And then I also just want to make sure that through the carbon neutrality plan, we are not saying that individuals have to trade out any type of appliance. So Jenny, did you want to add anything to that? Not to put you on the spot.
No, I think that's it. I think that, you know, we want to help people do these things because they want to, right? Like, and all of our work is based on making it affordable. You know, I do just want to clarify, we also don't want to put people on new sources of heating that would be more expensive. And that's not what we're doing, right? If you have an electric resistance furnace, right, like a baseboard heater, that will drive up your electricity bills, I promise, right? But a cold climate heat pump won't. And people either pay about the same or they might pay less. And so, you know, our goal is to do climate action only in ways that make things better. And we've got to convince the community of that, right? And we've got work to do to build that trust, but we're definitely not ripping out anybody's stoves. We're definitely, as Nicole said, even if we could, we wouldn't want to. We have no interest in that. And we frankly have no interest in forcing anybody to do anything that they don't see as good for them.
I didn't mean to say that that's what
Oh, no.
you were doing.
No, I know.
However, politicians, that sometimes these things have to be said, that we can't just force this issue, you know, on the people. And, you know, it's interesting because when I read this, nothing but about electricity. It's nothing but electricity. And I'm like, just not do it all at once.
And I think that's partially because of what is required in the chapter is very electrical focused. Like, it's not that that's the focus that we just picked. It's also the focus the state selected, building efficiency and energy. If I heard your comment as an action, Abel, would it be that you would want to see some discussion of household energy costs in this chapter and a more, I know there's a little section on that.
And really, that's all, just so that you look at it and say, okay, I can live with this. We're going to clean energy and that's what we're going eventually. In the meantime, I'm gonna keep my gas furnace. I can't afford to change it.
I also think that we under policy E.1.3, which is about reaching all segments with energy efficiency programs, we could add an implementation guideline that clarifies that our intent is to be supporting reducing household costs for low income families with all of the energy programs that we have. Because I do think that is the underlying intent. It's, you know, a challenge sometimes to, because of the way programs have been structured, to reach lower income households. And that's something we spent a lot of time talking about with sustainability as we were working on portions of the chapter, and especially the strategies. Parking lot for this chapter has a lot of items that try to focus on what are the next right things to do to meet that gap. It's very much recognized, I think, by the staff working on energy efficiency at the city.
Robert and then Tom.
Well, I appreciate it so much.
Just to make a comment towards Abel's comments, I think that the language on these goals and implementation guidelines already allow for what you're talking about. There's no mandate in any of this. These are promoting and moving towards and encouraging and shoulds. I think that that language allows that this is not forcing anything onto the city. Maybe we could talk about softening some of the language as we go forward. And I do,
If we had additional information that just gives them, okay, I feel better.
let people know, what does it cost, right? It's hard. I mean, we talk about this every day. There's a lot of, there's a lot of big information gaps. I learned.
Who doesn't have the authority to increase costs. That's when we're pushing it. Clean energy, but what happened with the vehicles? And then the lithium and it's getting dumped on right now. We'll get past it, I know. But that's a political type.
Clean energies, they all have a cost. They're all dirty in some.
No, I did.
You have to make those decisions.
This is the point to soften it.
So I like your talk about bring politics and then you talking about the language inside of the document. And I love the fact that there are very little, if any, politics, period, inside of the document. Tom, next.
Hey, I just want to, sorry, after Tom, I just want to note that the gentleman behind you has patiently been raising his hand. I don't know if members of the public. I just want.
We usually, the rules of procedure say that not during the committee discussion,
I just
but,
want to acknowledge that.
Understand.
but if you'd like to talk like afterwards, we do have.
To Jenny's comments about the numbers and so forth, not mandating, but encouraging people to go to using heat pumps, electric appliances, and so on and so forth, and electric vehicles and so forth. I think that if you have those as goals to do that, and you have an end target of 2030 being carbon neutral, there should be, you should be able to generate the data here to fill in how many, to get to carbon neutrality, how many homes have to be all electric, or apartments and businesses have to have electric heating to get to that carbon neutrality point. And the same with the vehicles, the city vehicles. If we're going to put in X number more of EV charging stations, that's got to be based on some estimate you have of how many electric vehicles there are going to be in Flagstaff by such a time. I just think it's basic data. It's basic data. And I think a call out box here describing the change in energy, the fundamental change in energy systems from on-demand systems to as available systems. You don't have to use that terminology, but that's basically what we're doing. It's just critical information to be in a call-out box to say, this is where we're going. To me, to say that I can find it someplace else, if I want to go through a 100-page APS document, I can call it out. Well, maybe I can, but I don't think we should ask our citizens to do that. I think we should give them the basic information up front. And so I'm making a proposal that we do that.
And then we have one online and Diana wanted to speak as well. So the proposal that Tom has made in front of us now, we have to do the whole lived with thing, which I'm not familiar with that process. So if anybody could help me out with this.
What is it, the specific proposal? Sorry.
The two things that we have a call out box that basically what I have written down here in much better words that, Sarah can write in her, and a call out box that says, we're making a fundamental change, in our energy system, and describing it. And then in either pie charts or whatever, with the basic information of power sources, electric vehicles, and electric heating, we have the pie charts that say, this is the rate that we're going to do it. This is the progress that we're going to start here. And that we're going to,
I need you to, Warren, we're going to need you to mute. We need you to mute, Warren. Sorry, Tom.
Anyway, so that's those two things.
And so when I think about that, Tom, and I think about equity, what I'm concerned about is, first of all, like, what part of information do we start at? We start at this part of the room and say, well, what kind of information do you want on here? What kind of information do you want? And then we go around and around until the wheels fall off, or do we say, also the type of information that we're giving them? I mean, You said that it was basic information, which I think we can find in other plans. Just, and I'm trying to use an example, maybe like a land development code underneath our regional plan. Well, when it doesn't, when it kind of references you to the land development code, that's where you go for that information. Then that plan will reference you to the deeper dive that you need to go to. And that's why I'm questioning the committee now is, does it, like, where does it begin and where does it end when it comes to this kind of information on a high level document like the regional plan? And I don't see a place for it because I don't know where it begins and where it ends. Susie?
Suggest that we put this to one of those things that we talk about at a later time.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I mean, I have some ideas, I'm sure everybody does, but we've for a long time.
And we have John.
If I could just make a quick comment, I mean, I'm a believer that more information is better than have something in the carbon neutrality plan would really big, important, and really critical. I also think to your point earlier, there's some misinformation out there and some misunderstanding in the community. And I think this is an opportunity to clear some of that up. So I don't know what that looks like, and I can't tell you where it begins and where it ends. I think we're missing an opportunity. If we don't put something in there that helps people understand. I'll tell you, I've learned more about the climate, the CMP tonight than I've known before. And I think I'm representative of many in the community. There's some people that are intimately familiar with it. A lot of people that are ignorant of it and afraid of it. So anyway, I would just point out that to your point about educating the public and bringing them along, this is just one more opportunity to do that.
So I wrote it in the parking lot, but do you want to do, and should we do an I will live with? I wrote it up as a call out box on the energy transition raised by Tom. Just kind of let your comment be what we're referencing. Staff can do a little work on that and bring it back as a parking lot item if that's, you know, when we do an I will live with, we usually just say who can live with it, and then everyone who can raise their hands. And if there's anyone who can't, then we.
Point of clarification, I heard Tom, two things, call out box, but also something that describes the progress. That seems to be something that APS does with their IRP. Maybe the call out box could say, for more information, see APS's IRP, to see how that transition will happen. So the call out box could be just, it's like education, informing the public. And I think that's good. I mean, I'm fine with that, but
That's a smart idea because it references the franchise that is going towards carbon neutrality by 2050. And it's taking the focus off the city, but the city's not the one that's doing it. Yeah, I like that.
I think.
Okay, so we're gonna go.
I don't believe that's what Tom is saying, though. And I may have heard this wrong entirely. He's saying, where is the chart that indicates how the city is getting carbon neutral? Number of electric cars that have to be in the city, the number of homes that have to be electric powered, the number of buildings that have to be changed, has nothing to do with APS. The grid part does. Entirely, that has nothing to do with the city. But how is the city achieving carbon neutrality? And what has to be done to get the city there? Did I hear that right?
That's in a nutshell.
Right.
Public, it would have to be.
Both public and private, but then now we have the county.
But and I'm gonna throw this in too. I think we were way off base of where we're going with a land use plan document right now. Way off base, way off track, and we need to get back to that.
I appreciate it. But I'm
We've
trying
been
to.
there most of the night,
Yeah.
to tell you the truth. We need to get back on a land use document. Not what APS does, not what somebody else does. What's the city land use document do? What are we supposed to be doing?
So
We will be getting to that.
let me just say really.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, it's okay. The issue is
Get cranky.
that it's not a small call out box if we're not referencing other documents. Even what you were just describing is, 10 or 15 pages of the carbon neutrality plan. And the city at least already has a document that describes that. And it's one that will get updated regularly. And so I'm not sure, and it includes things that are outside the scope. There's things that are in the scope and outside the scope. So again, some of this is about like, what is the practical purpose of this chapter? And it's a really important chapter, right? It affects a lot of other things and how we do it. But we want to dive into what the goals and policies actually say, and we can put this in the parking lot for now. I think it's easy in theory to say it sounds easy, much like with the water chapter. Michelle and I had a long back and forth about should water quality be its own section. And I tried it and it just made the chapter blow up like 3 times the size it was to try and do it, and created a lot of duplication. So some of those things, if you let us go explore them, we can see what can be done concisely, but it's very hard to do it without referencing larger documents that get into more detail, because we just can't get into all the detail at this level. But we can guide people to those sources.
And so then I agree with Dirk that we should get back on topic. But I think we could have maybe an appendix that might be pages long. There's a graph in the carbon neutrality plan that shows the wedges, different ways we're going to get there. And it's vague and people can have a lot of questions about it. It's not going to answer everything, but it gives them an idea of broad brush approach. And that is, I agree with Tom, to educate them on goals is fine. Shouldn't be it should be an appendix. It should be part of the land use plan, which we need to get back to. Diane?
This is going back to this as a land use plan, and I don't actually know if it goes here or where it will go, but one of the struggles that businesses that are looking at biomass utilization for energy have in finding property where they can do biomass storage. And so to the extent that that's also an economic development thing and a land use thing, and I don't know when it goes where, but it's definitely on point if we hope to see more biomass used in the community, get it out of the forest, get smoke out of our air and use it for great intended purposes. We need some land.
All right, and so Nicole, did you want to speak again?
Yes, thank you. Just real quick, I dropped a couple of notes in the chat, but I don't think that all of the committee members have their computers monitoring the chat. And I just wanted to mention that electric vehicles are also in APS's IRP. And then I also wanted to let the committee members know that Appendix A of the Carbon Neutrality Plan lists out specific information that may be of consideration later for those bike racked information discussions. But just for example, that we are hoping to help facilitate 2,000 homes to install 10 megawatts of distributed residential solar. So we've got some very specific opportunities and paths forward. So I just wanted to let the committee members know that that information is there in addition to the wedge that Commissioner or committee member Byer mentioned. Thank you.
So did we go as far as we needed to go, Tom?
Been in the parking lot, so
Excellent. Are you happy with that?
it's not going away forever.
I think we had a pretty robust conversation. I know it's getting late and we're getting tired. And I do apologize for allowing everybody to speak and everybody to have their word, but I'm pretty sure that's what my job is. Also, I mean, if you guys are serious about it, we could take a number of what quorum would be, and then whoever else wanted to drift out of here is fine as well, I guess, at this point, because it's so dang late.
Bedtime for a couple.
Yeah, and that's okay too. Also, take a temperature of the room for the committee. I think we should push on because we're in that spot to push on. But if the committee thinks we shouldn't, then I guess we could stop.
still want to go to do the miscellaneous, because we have a couple.
Yeah, we have to finish the agenda, but I mean, as far as I'm ready to continue with goals and policies. I don't think that would be too hard for us to do because we planned that before we came here.
Give it a shot.
Pretty fast last time.
Yep.
Yeah, we can roll through it, and those that need to leave, please do. We need how many to make a quorum? Steph can help me with that, and then we'll carry on.
I think we need 13.
Okay.
People online, so. Alicia and Walter, are you guys gonna stay with us to finish up tonight?
Okay, so are we at goal E1A or am I missing something?
No, you are.
Okay.
This is the bifurcated goal.
Yeah, okay. Achieve carbon neutrality for the city of Flagstaff by 2030 by reducing emissions from vehicles, buildings, and waste. Everybody fine with that? Anybody object? So we're gonna be moving to policy E11. Reduce energy consumption, increase efficiency, and reduce carbon footprint in new and existing buildings within the Flagstaff region. You okay with?
I'm sorry, I just was catching up with you. Back to E1A, just one thing.
Sure, go ahead.
Achieve carbon neutrality for the city of Flagstaff by 2030 by reducing emissions from vehicles, buildings, and waste. Jenny, correct me if I'm wrong, that's not the only thing you have to do. We have to sequester carbon dioxide to get there, won't we? I have to add sequester in there.
It's a great question. There are a lot of things we need to do. And so, yeah, I think we can, if the desire is for a more detailed statement there, I think we, yeah.
The combination of reducing consumption and taking CO2 out of the air, right?
So add sequestration is the
Sequester state.
Remove carbon dioxide. That's how we.
That Tom?
Sorry.
No, that's what we're here for. I do appreciate it. Yes, please.
When I was talking to him earlier, he said originally the net zero neutrality by 2030 or something was in the original and now it's not there. And he asked us to put that back. So, I don't know if it was in the last. In the last
I
regional
don't think it
plan.
would have, no.
No,
It
it might
wasn't
be in the
there yet.
carbon
plan.
It's in the carbon neutrality.
But it is here right now, right?
Yeah, it is achieved here. It's
Yes.
achieved carbon neutrality. Okay.
Yeah, so that should be good. That's a good point though, Susie. Thank you. All right. And forgive me, where are we?
You did, you want the.
Okay, support and develop, did I already say this? No, support and develop development of energy and climate goals and policies for all of Coconino County and consolidates. That,
To read all the big words.
yeah, forgive me, I can't see it at the moment. And coordinate plans developed to address climate change.
I think that was written to acknowledge the fact that Coconino being such a large county, every portion of it has a different strategy for climate action. And so rather than Coconino County writing a mega plan, their strategy is to work with the communities within the county and consolidate those more locally driven plans. At least that's where things are considered those.
Right, so for the county, the sustainability plan is a section within the county's comprehensive plan. So that's the existing goals policies, and of course, we're all updating all of our plans. That's so great. I mean, the county has sustainability goals. It's not, certainly not to the sophistication of the carbon neutrality plan. We will see where those go. And encouragement out of the regional plan might anticipated thing. I mean, what we would anticipate is coming out of the county's comprehensive plan update would be implementation action items where sustainability, diversity of incredible of much more now.
Committee Member Hamilton?
Based on some feedback that I've had with other people, is there any room for discussion of making goal 1E Bravo worded stronger to address climate change? Right now, it's just supporting the development of goals and policies and coordinating plans. Is that strong enough for 2045?
Committee members?
I would have to agree. That's
That's a really good point.
point.
Yeah, yeah.
Could they pick a year? I mean, to do the goals that have been written, say 2050, carbon neutrality by 2050?
Now, certainly not within the county's comprehensive plan sustainability section. No,
Now,
not now, no.
is there a discussion with the board of supervisors to pick a date for carbon neutrality?
That, the carbon neutrality has not been a discussion up through, it didn't come out of our last comprehensive plan, which is the only place we have a sustainability plan, and that is not been a discussion. So not sure where we'll go. Yeah.
I think we should recommend that the county come up with more information, more detail for this.
I would like
Carbon neutrality by 2050 is reasonable to me.
And even if it's not a number, just a better word, well, I think a number is important, right, Michelle? Just to have that deadline.
If you want to follow the model of the city.
I wasn't really picking a date. I was just using the 2045 as our future date, which is what we're moving towards, but focusing more on the word climate change, because that seems to be the hot thing that is going on right now. And people are very, very interested in that. And if we address it here at this level, I think it leads credibility and kind of hands it to the partners that that's something that the city wants.
Did you have?
I just think it's interesting to think about how much carbon does the entire Coconino County put out per capita relative to the rest of the United States? There's like 5 people.
I mean, and the infrastructure is so low that you don't have transmission. We have many people going through we issue building permits to homes every day that are 100% off grid. They barely have private road easement access to their property. It's not maintained by anyone. And they have solar and they have a backup generator that's a fossil fuel backup generator. And they do haul water, which is not a very efficient way to do your water. And then they're an on-site wastewater system. So they are completely off grid. That is what it is. Way of developing homes with current technology. Thank God that where we're at with solar panels right now, that you can do that with solar panels.
It's just such a different situation.
Completely
in the
different.
Greater county area.
Completely different situation, not to mention even the county services internally, sheriff's office, snow plowing in these areas. So many of the county services really are going to have a tough time. The county cares about sustainability, and has for the past several comprehensive plans. So
I just think it's kind of hard to get your arms around it. Also, just with the EV discussion, I mean, that's gonna be a long time before people are gonna have chargers. They don't even have broadband, right? I mean, it's, yeah,
It's a good point there.
yeah.
Tina, what did you think?
This is just a point of clarification, actually, not even a discussion point. We were talking about E1A. There was something about sequester carbon. It actually is out in E1.1 in the 3rd bullet point. It shows under embodied carbon, and that means sequestering carbon, just to be one clear. It's already there.
Yeah, so to eliminate duplicate.
So that one is trying to eliminate duplication.
Yeah, I apologize. That one is specifically about building and site materials. As opposed to, which there are concretes now that can pull in carbon, right? As opposed to, beyond buildings and sequestering and carbon in the air.
I think Walter has his hand up.
Oh, thank you. Walter? 1B. What we're speaking to right now.
Yeah, thank you. I I was curious. I guess what I see, what I see here, it appears to cover ways that you could reduce carbon emissions, but the opposite side of the coin is, you know, restoring the way carbon should be utilized. And I'm not an expert in this area, and I'm not by no means somebody you should come to and say, hey, you seem to know what you're talking about. Please don't ever say that to me. But I've just been learning a little bit about biosequestration, how carbon needs to go back into the soil, back into the plants or the trees, and it brings health back to maybe the NRCS guy, that conservation, he can probably explain it better than I could. But restoring the health of the soil, and that's perhaps the most effective way of reducing carbon. And so, at least from what I'm learning, so I'm wondering, is that not an interest within the jurisdiction of the city? I know that within the boundaries of the county, we are basically um, our soil and our even out on the reservation, especially, is there's basically a need for what do you call it, that when your garden doesn't have the nutrients it needs, it's just, you know, it doesn't have the adequate nutrients it needs to grow and grow plants or grass or whatever. But if I understand this correctly, biosequestration is bringing the carbon back into the soil and creating a healthy soil again. Whereas, you know, these are reducing emissions. That's one way, you know, maybe switching from a gas guzzling vehicle to an electric vehicle. But, you know, what about actually creating spaces where you can put carbon back into the ground? You know, just food for thought.
Yeah, Diana?
There are just 2 points to be added to what he just said, that there is a technology that burns woody biomass and other forms of material and creates something called biochar, which is considered a soil enhancement. And that's actually, there are multiple companies in town looking at that. And actually the city just put together its EPA grant that includes producing biochar out at the landfill. So that's moving around as an option. His other point, let's see, the other concept is actually carbon burial, and that's filling up holes with trees and then trying to sequester them for 100 years. And you can actually get carbon credits for doing that. And that's yet another proposal in the city's EPA grant to test. And there is already activity in this region where people are testing that concept. So.
Diane, are you saying, you know, I'm hearing it in this way, forgive me if it's
okay.
wrong, but so out of kind of respect for the earth, since we took it out of the earth, then it's our duty to put it back into the earth?
I would like to think that there was that ethical component, but I think, to be honest with you, I think people see a great opportunity to create a soil enhancement for agriculture
All right, Anthony, I've got to go. I've got an early morning flight out of Phoenix, so
Hey, you want to catch a ride? I'm driving Tesla parts, 80,000 pounds. I'm leaving at 3 a.m. Yeah.
I'm taking my wife, so she.
Oh, I gotta sleep. All right, bud. Thanks, bud. Thank you very much. All right,
Two hands.
okay. Please.
I can just add, thank you, Diane, for that. Diane is completely right. Walter, I want to thank you for putting, into words what we attempt to do and what we talk about with carbon dioxide removal in a much more beautiful and human, way. And I just really appreciate it. We need more of that. And that's 100% right. We think about carbon dioxide removal as sort of any of the above, right? Maybe that's biomass, maybe that's preserving forests, maybe that is biosequestration. So it is 100% within the goals of the city, because we're not going to be able to reach that. We need to take carbon out of the air and healthy soil that. And that gets it a little bit at, Walter's point. Again, you made it a lot better. Just in terms of time, I think that this is a topic that spans both the natural resources chapter, which we did talk about, carbon dioxide removal as part of the natural resources chapter. So I think it makes sense to go back and look at that. And did we address it well enough? I think a reference here makes tons of sense as well. For the most part, especially biosequestration, you're doing it on a landscape scale level, right? You're thinking about your ranches and are you sequestering carbon in the soil and your, so it's a little bit more of that regional conversation. And I think a little bit more of that chapter.
I was going back to this B, right, which is focused on the county.
Yes.
And we don't have Melissa here, right? So.
Yeah. The bottom here.
Melissa,
Second string.
But could we add something to that talks about these coordinating plans to develop to address climate change and carbon neutrality? Something like that, because the county could do things with their own buildings, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's things that you could do that wouldn't be in these smaller specific plans or whatever you're calling those.
Area plans.
Area plans, or they might be, because if you have county services out there, you might be. So adding something about carbon neutrality at the end, or I'm open to other ideas too, but just something that would be, because climate change is so broad. What does that mean? Does that climate change adaptation? Definitely. Sure, you're talking about that with Park and other
Control district.
Right, exactly.
Their existence.
So, but something that gets at that carbon neutrality or that reduction of emissions or reduction of greenhouse gas. Carbon neutrality is a broad term. So we could suggest that and see what the say.
It'll be the sustainability team, the county
Sustainability team.
That would look at, where are they at right now? And is that something that they would, they would see as helpful?
So do you make that suggestion or put it in the parking lot, or do you go talk to your team?
I just put it in the notes for the chapter revisions that we should take it back to me first. Is that okay, Jess?
Yeah. Did we really read this on?
We did our internal one,
Internal,
but
right.
this is we still will have time to make edits based on
Yeah.
the conversation before
Got
the
it.
working
Okay,
draft.
I'm remembering the internal one.
Yeah. We're moving version 2 to 3 right now. I just want to point out to Anthony that we're at the bottom of quorum, like 11 people is what we can have because our quorum is half plus 1,
Excellent. I was just gonna ask, we still have quorum?
just barely.
Good. Let's not try to lose one more, but if we have to, please let us know because then we have
So
to.
if anyone drops out, please speak because the quorum will end at that time. Thank you.
Moving on to policy E11, reduce energy consumption, increase efficiency, and reduce the carbon footprint in new and existing buildings within the Flagstaff region.
So I want to point out a weird thing. Well, a thing that was not possible in the last plan because we didn't have these bifurcated goals. But even though we have a bifurcated goal, each of the policies still applies to both the city and county within the region. So just to make sure that's really clear. It'll be something we'll have to address in the like, what does the plan do and how do I read it part if this is the way to go. So
Thank you very much for that. It helps connect things in my brain for sure. We're moving on to implementation goals. And if you guys wanted to kind of read the and then tell me if you want to talk about them. And John.
Anthony, quick comment on
Yes.
implementation guidelines, the second bullet point. It says move towards requiring. That word just seems mandatory as opposed to encourage, promote, should, and some of the language that I see in all the other bullet points stuck out.
Yeah, that's a good point. Committee?
I have to agree with John. It is the one word that kind of stands out in this entire section.
I
It
agree.
doesn't flow.
You can just remove it.
Take it out.
Zero energy buildings in the city of Flagstaff.
Yeah, because that goes as promote,
Drop out
encourage.
Okay, so I got head nods on that one. Is that gonna work for you, staff?
any,
So in the carbon neutrality plan, we do say that we need to meet our goals. We need to have net zero energy residential standards. So that's where this comes from. I'm perfectly fine. I don't think that this has to like pave that way in any way, and that will be a very long conversation with the public that we are planning starting basically next year and to have a 5-year conversation with the building industry on it. You know, and so, yeah, I'm not deeply worried about it.
and should it be clarified then that it's move toward net zero energy buildings for new residential construction? Or would you like to just keep
I
it?
think broadly is fine, and I think it's just moving towards, right? I think buildings make sense. I think that's.
That input, John. Anything else? Then we'll be moving on to policy E12, which is reduce greenhouse gas emissions through the implementation and promotion of fuel switching and clean energy retrofits in new and existing buildings within this Flagstaff region. Okay, implementation guidelines. You guys a chance to look at all of those. Okay on that one? Or am I moving too fast? Policy E13.
Could I just ask, I'm sorry,
Yes, please.
a clarification, if the city can't require people to use electric appliances, it says through regulations in this first bullet. Would the city promulgate new standards for buildings that would require?
Well, regulation includes like our sustainable building incentives. So there are parts of the regulations where like you get more of some density or lot coverage or something in exchange for.
I understand.
Yeah. We can't require it, but there's ways we can construct regulations that support it.
In the by regulations, it's incentives that people elect into. So we can't require it, but we can provide incentives within code that you can voluntarily choose to sign to that standard, and in return, you get, like Claire said, an increase in density allowance, a reduction in parking requirements, et cetera.
So we'll be moving on to policy E13. Are we ready?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
You got it.
Ensure that all segments of the Flagstaff region have access to energy efficiency programs and vehicle electrification capabilities in or near their homes. I like that. I like it. Implementation guideline.
And Elsa already added a note to have an implementation guideline, just putting out the intent to reduce household costs as part of this goal.
Yeah.
So don't forget that came from Abel's earlier comments. You captured already.
Okay, so we'll be moving on to policy E14. We only got a couple left, guys. Hang in there with me. Advance the electrification of buses, micro mobility devices, and electric vehicles across the Flagstaff region by planning for adequate charging capacity and increasing electric demand. Any problems with this one? Okay, implementation guidelines. Let you guys read those real quick.
If an existing multifamily offers electric vehicle charging, doing down in the valley, almost every building, you still have to have a way to do it. Like infrastructure, it's gonna be a lot of.
Code already requires that they have EV ready parking spots. It just doesn't require they put in
Like into the.
yeah, so anything already has to be built so you can put in a charging station somewhere at some point in your building, whether or not
The electric wiring.
electric wiring essentially is there, the place to bring a charging station and wire it in.
Nice, so you don't have to pull up pavement when you in 10 or 20 years.
So that's the difference between EV ready and actually requiring the charging station.
Information. Thank you, Tina.
All of that, just as a sidebar, all of that being included at the beginning makes your electric panels bigger and your transformers bigger and the wire coming from APS bigger and increases the costs. And these are those trade-offs that I've talked about before. I'm not going to go deep into this, but I've got a lot of personal reservations about electrification of buses. I will withhold that until transportation.
Excellent. I'm really actually interested in knowing about that because I've been looking at a lot of articles lately about that stuff. I'm glad we finally have an expert on the committee. So we'll be moving on to goals. I think this is our final goal, guys. E.2, increase the Flagstaff region's use of renewable energy sources while planning for the infrastructure needs to support an expanding and evolving electrical grid. I think that's kind of cut and dry. All right, we'll move on to policy E and C 2.1, expanding renewable energy production and prioritize energy storage in new utility scale renewable energy developments. Any comments online? Or Robert?
Utility scale storage is, I think, something way outside of the scope of what this document is. Utility scale, it means we're talking APS, or we're talking stored hydro, or we're talking microgrids with battery backups. And I think that that's outside of this.
So I had a question for you, Robert, only because I'm not an expert in this field by any means. Tom was talking about in his document that we're going to be doing some changing dramatically, so this also means that the grid itself and the utility or the franchise that we're currently using might be seeing changes as well.
Most definitely.
So in that context, would this be appropriate since we're kind of visioning that there's going to possibly be some competition for once? Or am I not hitting the right?
I know the intent behind this was that the city and county's permitting be streamlined, because there is some permitting we have to do and the county has to do through zoning codes to allow that infrastructure to go forward. And I think the point of it was to try and make sure that that's as smooth a process as possible with a lot of bumps in the road. Like that's really what we're trying to get across, but maybe the wording doesn't get that as across as clearly to somebody who sees it from the APS energy productions or the energy grid side of things. But that's the goal, is that if there's permitting needed from us to make some of that happen, that we have a process that really prioritizes and moves it forward as part of meeting our carbon neutrality goals and climate action and.
For the county specific. The city does not have land, but the county does have utility scale solar or wind installations, so.
So we could at the state land parcels, I think. Big enough. And I'm state land
A lot of
and
questions about
state
that.
land is getting ready, I know, to do some further assistance to people to understand what the energy production capability is of state land parcels because there's.
Doesn't have his hand up.
There are pieces, but it's not many.
I would point out though, from the county's perspective, so the county's 2015 comprehensive plan gave some nice direction to the county. Updated zoning ordinance to accommodate what we don't now call the renewable energy ordinance. Typically plan for utility scale. That's primarily and it's taking place on huge areas of land that are completely outside of the Flagstaff regional plan planning area boundary. Actually, it's 100% ranches so far, and often ranches interspersed with checkerboard, where they're leasing land on state land. So by the county renewable energy ordinance, I'd be happy to send you a link on where the storage associated with it would also. On as far as transmission, I mean, from what we experience and what we know is it's the existing transmission lines that primarily existed because of the old coal plants that got shut down that are part of what's accommodating part of why, you know, this was just a great win-win situation for ranchers in the county, having the capacity now freed up on those transmission lines that go through our county. So I don't know if that helps at all with the discussion.
I was just questioning whether it had whether it really pertained to this document. You're saying that it does, like, go.
It might not be worded as well as it could be though, so we'd be happy to look at wording suggestions for it.
I would say instead of expand, maybe support county initiatives. Something like that, so that it's not to storage, to uneligible. That kind of thing. And she's laughing because it's probably been brought up.
I haven't heard it, but it's.
Sounds like something somebody could talk to her about.
Why is it just municipally owned land should be evaluated for on-site solar and electric? Why not county and why?
I think there are specific areas of municipally, I can't talk now. Municipally owned property that we want to target, I think. Why that's a strategy, or why it's implementation guideline, but I don't know if the county has similar parcels it's interested in that for, but the city very specifically has parcels we're interested in. It's mainly the landfill, Wildcat, places where we already have a big piece of infrastructure and we could add solar and wind as a complementary use. Yeah.
Does that satisfy you, Robert?
Yes.
And how about the committee?
You're the expert here too, though.
Okay, so we're moving on to the last set of implementation guidelines. Go ahead and briefly peruse those. Anyone has their hand up? How about online? Did we miss Warren?
Walter and Alicia are still here.
But Walter had his hand up, but it's down.
Oh,
Now
cool.
his question got answered. Walter, do you still have a question?
No, I think that recommendation that was just made to change the wording pretty much answered my question, because I felt like this was I thought earlier it was said that APS and the utility industries were doing all that good stuff, not the city. So I was just thinking, how can I reduce the parking fee rates downtown if we switch to solar? Anyway, I'm just being facetious.
That's a good night.
I don't know if I'm laughing because it's funny or because I'm delirious, but good one, Walter.
We have first thing on the plan.
You know, sometimes you have to embed like something really ridiculous to see if people are actually reading something, and that could be our joke one.
Okay, so did anybody want any clarifying definitions from the chapter or any last minute comments about the strategies, parking lots? If not, we'll be closing out this portion of the meeting. And it looks like we're closing out this portion of the meeting and moving on to number 9. Can we not do that? Okay, and then we'll go down to miscellaneous from committee members. Does anybody want us to talk about stuff?
I want to suggest that I think we lost some really good people, that had to leave. And so I wondered if we could, if we have not put 2 chapters in one meeting. These were 2 big deals. And I'm just wondering if we couldn't, I mean, I understand that we want to keep things rolling and everything, but I think it wouldn't be too bad if we had to go past August or, whatever. But just, or maybe have meetings more often, just so that we can keep them more concise.
So going past August sounds easy, except like basically we're at the point with the process where a delay of a month is actually a 6-month delay because of the election cycle. So it's not very easy to move the big targets. Like we need to meet those big milestones or we're gonna miss an election cycle. But we could the only meeting ahead where we have 2 full chapters to look at is one where we're looking at transportation and infrastructure and public safety. And if those feel too big, I could send out a doodle and we could find like another date to squeeze in between middle of May and the end of June.
What are those 2 again? Transportation and
Infrastructure and public safety. So if you wanted to split those out, we would just have to find another date for 4 or 5 weeks out from that time frame. So it could be done. But I'd be happy to do that inquiry by email.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I was a little bit concerned when I saw the water and the energy just because they're so impactful and also there's so much to them, coming together. So I'm glad that you brought that up. Thank you. Any other discussion items? We're going to go with RPO discussion, which, forgive me.
Just to give an update.
Give an update.
So, okay, sorry,
at
my
9:50.
brain, it was a late calendar last night too. And forgive me if my words are muddled. I sent out an invite to all of those who expressed interest in doing the resource protection overlay site visit, where you see that bringing 2 rounds. We're gonna do kind of a 101. That will be a team. So 101 is kind of explaining what it is, and then the site visit. So actually, now that I'm saying that, if anybody's interested, I can just forward that invite to everybody for the 101, because it's something you can just log into if you want to learn about what is the resource protection overlay, and the origins of it, what's its intent, and just get some background on it. So I can send that to the whole entire group. But also last call, if you do want to go on the site visit. Yeah, I think I got, is that your hand up? Because you, okay. I'll add you, Anthony. So yeah, just wanted to kind of give that. So looks like end of this month, very beginning of May. So thank you guys.
Let's talk about May Art Walk.
So really quickly, the way back when, if you'll remember from December, we had a group that got together to help select an artist to create her art and other materials for the regional plan. And the group selected Sonia London Hall, who's actually the same artist who created the art boxes that we were using at public events. And so she's going to host a May 3rd art walk event focused on the regional plan at the Heart Box. And I will be sending out information on that in the next few weeks. But if you would mark your calendar to come listen to Sonia reflect on what the art boxes did and how arts can be incorporated into our thinking on planning. And then from that, she's going to be working through the summer on creating not only cover art, but she's also agreed to some chapter dividers or section dividers that will be inspired by the work gathered from the public and these conversations. So thank you all who participated in that work with Jana and the BPAC, and we'll have some beautiful art for the plan, which I think is a fine tradition that Flagstaff has had for several plans, and looking forward to continuing it. That's all I have.
Very much, Sarah. Now we'll be introducing new members. The only new member I know of is Robert Hamilton, who has.
We forgot. Yeah.
The heck out of himself earlier, and I just want to welcome you to the committee. Your expertise is invaluable. Really happy to see you part of the fray. Such a diverse conversation that you had today. Next meeting will be Tuesday, April 23rd at 6 p.m. right here or on the Teams meeting. Thank you all for being with us. And the meeting is adjourned.
Good job, Anthony. Yeah. Way to hang in there, pal. You had two tough chapters. Say David Oja.
Rethinking everything at this point.
Yeah.